Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Don't let your dreams be dreams. Just do it.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the enforcement. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I am your host, Dave Bourne, and it is April 27, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. Also 7 o'clock Arizona time for now, as Arizona does not change their clocks. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as Stitcher, at least by the next day. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And I wish they would start wearing their own gang signs or actually, you know what it is? It's that fucking lapel pin. They have that like flag. Anybody wearing that little lapel, I think that's what it's called, that flag pin, they're a member. That's a fucking gang sign, just like, you know, the Bloods and the Crips. They wear it really small, though, so it's hard to tell from far away. You need, like, binoculars. Anyway, we're happy to hear from you, and you can reach us via phone, even though we haven't got a phone call, and I don't remember the last time we got a phone call, but yet I still have a phone that you can call in and give your comments at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Ever since I left Blog Talk Radio, I used to get like a fair amount of calls. I don't know if just people don't pay attention to changes or they just still have the same old number or just people stop listening or who knows. Well, I mean, I know I have people listening, so I think more of the people listen now to the archives than the live show. So I definitely need to work on getting more people to listen live as opposed to the archives so we can get some interaction with the listeners. And you can also Skype into the show. I don't know that a lot of shows do that. At Nonpartisan Liberty for All is the username, and just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about. And check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to all our Facebook pages. We actually have 4, and other social media info, as well as contact information and more, pictures, archives, all sorts of things at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. I just realized I haven't heard from Ken Schortgen yet, who joins us every other Wednesday, and I did check with him, and I never prepare anything in the event that something happens and Ken doesn't show up because he's been so reliable. I mean, if he told me beforehand, I obviously would. But I mean, I never, if he says he's going to be there, I have, I don't know about never, but at least in a long, long time, prepared something in the event that he doesn't show up because he's so reliable that he always shows up. So hopefully there's not some emergency. And if he didn't show up, I would think that there's some emergency going on. But anyway, I have a let me text. I actually did get a phone call. Hopefully that was not Ken calling saying I cannot make it. But I did want to talk for a minute about about yesterday's show. And you know, there's a couple things I want to mention. One, I was listening back, which is something that even Mark Edge of Free Talk Live, and I was doing this before he even brought it up, but had suggested always listen back to your shows, you know, maybe when you've been doing it 5 or 10 years, but I mean, you can always get better. So always listen back and look at the things that you can improve, look at the issues that you have. And I'm aware of a lot of issues that I have, whether it comes to or saying something slow or pausing, things along those lines, or using certain words that I'll use them in one sentence and then maybe the next sentence I won't, but I'll use it again in the sentence after that. So, I mean, I strive to be as good as possible, and I'm still not even close to where I want to be at. And it makes it harder with the whole work schedule and everything and doing this show 3 nights a week. But again, as I've always said, I choose to do it. You know, I don't have to do a show. I can just go to work and then after work rest if I want to, or do nothing. But I'm trying to accomplish something here as well. So I was listening to last night's show, and I thought the content and what I put together, although I could have, there's a couple spots where I could have done a better job and at least got a sentence or two in about some things. But only doing a 2-hour show now, I only have so much time. So that was one of the reasons why, but I still felt like, hey, I could have done better where I missed a couple things. And I had gotten an email before. I'm so conscious of this now because I got an email before, which I think was unfair, especially based on what my focus was. Although they did have some legitimate points, some of it was also just very insulting. So there's a difference between constructive criticism and trying to insult somebody. It was a combination, to be honest. There was some constructive criticism, there was some insults. So they did have some points, and I always think about that now, but I'm not an expert on everything, and I can't be. And there's only so much research I have time to do. And really the show is more about my opinions on what's going on, informing people the gist of what's going on, not say when it comes to the history part of it, yes, informing people of the history, but not going into in depth with it. So anyway, I thought I did a pretty good job content-wise, but I felt like I listened back and I just felt monotone and not, I wouldn't say emotional enough, but upbeat enough and not up enough for the radio. And while I was doing it, I felt like I was, because I'm very conscious of that. But then when I listened back, I'm like, well, not like I was totally monotone, like today's show, we are going to, I mean, it wasn't like that, but it just wasn't enough energy, I guess would be the best word to put into it. And I didn't feel like there was a best, I put the greatest amount of energy into the show yesterday. So I apologize for that, because I thought the content was pretty good, and I thought there was a lot of things that I wasn't even aware of. Some of them I was, but that was very important. And the other thing is that I looked up again all of the symptoms of or long-term damage of opiates, what opiates can do to your body long-term, and side effects. the side effects are, things like constipation and just basic things that you'd get from any other drug. And long term, there's nothing that I saw that really is anything that you can't live with. It's not like it will destroy your liver or your heart or your kidneys or anything like that. So again, I asked the question, especially with opiates, I know they're very addictive, but at the same time, that's really the only thing. And if you look at cigarettes, fucking cigarettes are just as addictive as opiates. And even alcohol, it takes a lot longer to get addicted to alcohol. But once you get addicted to alcohol, from what I understand, I've never been addicted to alcohol, so I don't know. But from what I understand, it's pretty bad. And withdrawal from cigarettes is pretty bad too. I've never smoked, so I don't know anything about that. But my point being is that if they weren't illegal, you eliminate the problem with being able to get them, just like cigarettes. If somebody can't get their cigarettes, they might do something to get them. And to use what they're using to ban it, or what they used in the first place, that had nothing to do with the fact that the dangers of addiction anyway. It was for racist reasons, and then it had to do with the war. And I know everybody will say that I'm crazy because it's so bad and all of this shit. It's because you've been fucking brainwashed to believe that. That's what it is. Because if it wasn't illegal, there would be no fucking problem with it. Because so what? If somebody's addicted to it, it doesn't matter. Now, there is, I guess, the issue of, well, somebody could overdose. And, of course, if it was legal, there'd be so much more information. You could go to doctors. You could go to pharmacists. You could go, well, maybe there wouldn't be, well, I guess there would still be pharmacists, but you just go and buy it. It wouldn't be showing prescription. But that's more with the really powerful shit. And a lot of those people are people that are trying to fucking die from it, and that's why they're dying, not because they actually overdose. Heroin's a different story, and heroin is also a drug mixed on the fucking street, and who knows what's in it. So to me, a lot of it is just hype. And of course, I believe all drugs should be legal, not based on that principle, but based on the principle that you can put whatever you want in your own body. But at the same time, I don't even think it's that bad. It comes from a plant, and really the only downside to it is the addiction. But if it wasn't illegal, who gives a fuck if you're addicted? Because you can buy it for a reasonable price. You'd be able to go to the supermarket or a pharmacy or whatever, and it'd be the same as alcohol. So it's a bunch of bullshit. It's just like in thinking about my show, saying the word fuck, and a 3-year-old hearing fuck. What does that do? Why do people give a shit if a 3-year-old hears the word fuck? You know why? Because they're conditioned to think that, oh, you can't hear that or you can't say that. It's a fucking word. So anyway, Ken is on the line. So I'm going to bring him on. A lot going on with gold and the currency, so I'm sure he'll have a lot to talk about. I had looked at his website, The Daily Economist, which you can find at thedailyeconomist.com, and almost everything has to do, the majority of articles have to do with gold. So there is a lot of things going on with gold. And I'm sure he has some other stuff to talk about, as well as the last time he was on was a couple weeks ago, as he joins us every other Wednesday, Ken Schortgen. Ken, thanks for joining. Well, let me turn off the music here. I know you had some other technical issues today on another show, So let me make sure you don't have any more. You there? Oh, now he's having technical issues on my show too. But actually, on the other show, it was them, because Kenny, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Dave?
There we go. Yeah, I was saying that
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You can hear me, right? No, I guess can't. That's you on your side that you can't. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you, but I'm listening to the stream, so we'll work it that way.
I guess you're having a lot of issues today
I can
with
only hear you from. Hang on a second. Let me
connecting.
See if
I know it's on your side.
Go ahead and talk.
Yeah. Can you hear me there?
No, I can't hear you through Skype. I'm listening to the stream.
Well, let me look at my Skype. There shouldn't be any issues here. Let's look at the audio settings.
Hey, Dave. I'm gonna go ahead and reboot out of Skype. I'm gonna reset my headset and I'll pop back on.
All right. Yeah, today's not your day, man. As I was saying, that Ken was on another show where it wasn't on his side, it was on their side because they had said so, and they were having some issues.
No, the other one I know is Angel's fault, though.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was saying, that I know it was their fault. Because I had actually just listened right before I came on the air. So that I know was their fault. But this, I'm pretty sure that it's on your side, although you never know. I could have done something. So anyway, while we're waiting for Ken to try to straighten that out, let me go to my Skype and see. I mean, I haven't changed anything on my settings, and yeah, I mean, although I do not see the microphone coming up, so I think it might be me, actually. And it might be, I don't think I've had anybody on Skype since it converted over from, what did it convert over from? Windows 10 just automatically upgraded, unfortunately. Let's see, it's making fucking stupid noise. Windows 10 actually was converted. So let me open this and make sure. No, Skype is, it should be working. So let me try to connect Ken now, although I don't see.
Okay, how are we doing this time?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
No luck?
I think I know what it is. I gotta, because
this is weird.
No, I think I know what it is. Let me, see, that's there.
This is very weird.
Hello? No, I think I know what it is, because what happened was, there we go. That might do it. Okay, what about now? No, still can't hear me. All right, let me try one more thing.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm not connected to you for some reason.
Okay. It doesn't show Skype is muted. What about now?
Let me shut off the...
I'm pretty sure it's on my side now because...
I can hear you on the stream when I'm on your website, but I'm not hearing you through Skype.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And you can hear me, I think, but...
I can hear you. So, this is always fun. Yeah, I don't think I've had anybody on since I converted from Windows 10. So, but it's
we'll just keep letting you monkey with stuff until I can hear you through Skype, or we can just do the delay.
Let me take a break. and I'll work on this while we're taking a break. So let's do that. So basically, I'll need you to mute your. Oh wait, no, it's nothing. Nothing on there. What the fuck did I do that? I know I was working on something, but I don't believe anything changed since the last time I had somebody on Skype. Oh no, you know what? I just had Rob on Skype, so that shouldn't be causing an issue. And you're sure it's nothing on your side, right? I don't see my microphone coming through. That's the whole thing. When on Skype, I should see my microphone coming through, and I don't. So let me play something real quick.
Not unless my headphones just aren't functioning.
Okay, why don't you mute your Skype real quick? I'll play a quick clip and try to figure it out and hopefully get this going. So we'll be right back after this.
All of us want assurance that the things we buy are safe. What's the best way for us to get it? One way is to have a government agency assess products and allow or forbid their sale. This is the way it works for medicines. The Food and Drug Administration requires and oversees lengthy, expensive tests of each new drug. Based on those tests, it decides whether or not that drug may be used. A different approach is to allow competing private firms to assess the products and give each one a rating. Customers decide for themselves whether to buy or not based on these ratings. This is the way it works for thousands of products, from toasters and hair dryers to insulation and bulletproof vests. Manufacturers hire a private certification firm, such as Underwriters Laboratories, to evaluate their product's design and manufacturing process and to test it. If the product passes, the certifier's logo is added to it. Manufacturers pay for private certification because it increases sales. Customers who see the logo know that the product has passed rigorous safety tests, and they are more likely to buy it as a result. Stores also value assurances of product safety. They don't want unhappy customers or lawsuits from selling things that turn out to be harmful, so they'll pay extra to stock certified products. Certification firms such as Underwriters Laboratories have no monopoly. They have competitors. Accordingly, they have a strong incentive to be cautious, but also fast and affordable for manufacturers. On the one hand, they depend on their reputations for trustworthiness built up over the years. A certifier who puts its logo on a product that turns out to be dangerous ends up with a damaged reputation and a higher likelihood that manufacturers will use a competing certifier in the future.
Okay, I'm testing.
On the other hand, if a certifier is
here.
overcautious and takes a long time on costly extra testing that delays a product from getting to market, or if it refuses to certify a product that turns out to be safe, again, it will lose customers. Self-interest pushes these competing certifiers to avoid both kinds of mistakes, neither certifying dangerous products nor refusing to certify safe ones. Compare this to a government agency that has a monopoly on deciding whether a good becomes available. Its incentives are very different. What happens when such an agency approves a dangerous product that ends up causing harm? There are serious consequences for the careers of the officials who let that happen. As a result, they take so long on costly extra testing that they do delay products from getting to market. When the product is a life-saving medicine, people die who could have been saved. Unlike a voluntary certification firm, a monopoly government agency faces no check on this kind of caution. If the agency rejects a product that's safe or takes years for additional tests, the manufacturer cannot turn to another certifier. No other certifiers are permitted.
Here.
The government agency doesn't have to worry about losing revenue or going out of business because it's funded by taxation and not by the voluntary payments of its manufacturer customers. How much safety is the right amount? It is always possible to test a product one more time before selling it, but the tests cost time and resources to run, so the more rigorous the safety testing procedures, the more a manufacturer must charge to cover its costs, and the less money it has to invest in new products. Who should decide at what point the cost of more tests becomes too high? Under monopolized government safety regulation, government officials decide. Under voluntary certification in a free market, everyone decides for him or herself, usually with the help of certification agencies and professionals such as doctors and pharmacists who make it their business to learn all they can about the products they advise us to use. Instead of the one-size-fits-all approach in which the government bans all products that fail to meet arbitrarily determined criteria, the market process creates and communicates various assurances of product safety, and each buyer decides for him or herself.
I know everybody out there, I apologize for the talking over this. We're going to see if we can connect with Ken. Something seemed to happen, and I don't know. I know I had somebody on Skype a couple weeks ago, and I did not have any problems. Now, Windows 10 essentially upgraded itself, and I don't see my microphone coming through the computer. And why is that? Is it no, it's still not coming through. Oh, no, it's still not coming through there. So why it's not coming through, I don't know. I don't want to waste half the show doing this, so we might have to switch to phones. Let me try to call Ken back and see if I can...
You there?
Can you hear me? No.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but shit. It says my microphone is working fine.
I can't hear you, but I can hear you through your stream.
So is there fucking shit, man.
I can only hear you through the stream. You want me to try to go ahead and call in?
Yeah, I guess we can do that. I don't know why it might have something to do with the fact that it upgraded to Windows 10, and I don't know what the fuck is going on with it, but yeah, I guess call in. So we'll have Ken call in. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience there.
Okay, give me the number. Post the number in Skype real quick, and I'll plug off and give a call in.
So we'll just have Ken call in and have him on the phone. But it still bothers me that this fucking thing isn't working. And the fact that now I'm going to have to mess with this fucking all night. Yeah, because usually the settings were all set up from previously. And when I look on the on Skype, when I look on the microphone coming through the computer in general, it is not. And it is a device that is set up. So that's why I don't know why it is.
Hello, welcome to Skype call testing service. After the beep, please record a
We'll
message.
even do this on the air.
Afterwards, your message will be played back to you.
Why is my fucking microphone not working? I know everybody out there wants to listen to this too. So, and let me get the phone with Ken calling in. Oops.
able to hear your own.
So, Ken, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So we have Ken now on the phone. Do you have any echo or everything good?
I just hear something about microphone settings.
Yeah, that's I was trying to test Skype. The microphone is not going back to the computer for whatever reason. So it's like one half of the mix minus is not going back. It's funny that I like probably it's like I jinxed myself after like, oh, I heard you have issues earlier today. And then, of course, I have issues on my side. So, but that's all right. We can do it on the phone. It just, when I have issues, it kind of throws me off a little. But anyway, so I was saying before all of the issues began that the majority of stories out there, at least for today and this week, have to do with gold and everything that's going on with gold, including the China's new exchange, or not exchange market, but their new market. Right.
Yeah. See, the thing about it is gold is sort of the secondary thing. It's all about the currency war. What's going on right now is it has a severe effect on what's going to happen to the dollar in going days. You know, I did an article today out on the Daily Economist that's showing the dichotomy between the dollar and gold prices. Since January, when gold prices started going up, the dollar has been falling from 98 on the index down to at a point 93.5.
Yeah, and I had seen that. I saw that article where you did a graph and compared the dollar, and then you see January, February, it's up, and then how it like dips down, and compared to gold, which is the opposite.
Right, and you know, for the longest time, there was a lot of manipulation with gold prices, but the gold for eternity has always been like a balance scale against currency.
Well,
so
it should be. It's like it is, but it's not. But yeah, because it's not real. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, what's happening is it's finally disconnecting from the manipulation, and it's proving itself to. So when you see gold prices going up, then you're seeing that the dollar devaluation is starting to kick in. Another thing that's causing it too is the world is moving away from dollars. The world is rejecting dollars and treasuries as a safe haven.
It took them long enough.
Yeah, well, everything has its timing. You know, think about this. You know, for anybody who's watched any network television or studies finance, they've been trying to discount gold ever since 2011, because if they didn't really manipulate gold and they started printing this vast amounts, trillions of dollars of quantitative easing, then you were going to suddenly have gold probably being at $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 an ounce. So they had to manipulate it down to allow the expansion of the money supply without causing the inflation.
I'm saying even going back to the 70s when they got up the gold standard, and I understand basically from you talking about this, how one of the issues, and that seems to be changing now, is that the problem was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was nobody else to kind of take over, that everybody else's currency was so fucked up and in such bad shape for all these years that there was really nobody else to make that happen. And now it looks like there is, with China and Russia.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. The reason that the dollar became the reserve currency is because after World War II, all the economies of Europe were in tatters. Russia, a communist society, was not going to have the global reserve currency. And China was not the country that it is today. Japan was destroyed. So when you take a look at the different countries that make up the basket of primary currencies, the yen is only in its strength because the U.S. rebuilt the entire economy of Japan. Britain was the previous reserve currency, and because they had gold and silver, they were able to, the pound still had some type of strength compared to everybody else. And then, of course, the euro came in 1999. So now that we've got most of the economies in the world, especially after the petrodollar agreement, oil resource countries started really gaining a lot of wealth. And once the Soviet Union fell, you had about a 10-year span where the oligarchs, the ones we would call the Russian mob, the Ukrainian mob, when Russia was in an absolute disaster before Putin took over, you had all the oligarchs selling off the natural resources of Russia to Western oil companies and British Petroleum, and pretty much being propped up by the CIA and all the other good old NGOs. As a matter of fact, Rockefeller was there to take care of the Soviet Union bankruptcy, and he pretty much had control over the oligarchs, was just raping all of the natural resources. And then when Putin solidified power, the rumor is he went and knocked on the door, this mansion that Rockefeller had in Moscow, and said, "You either get out or we're going to arrest you right now."
Jesus.
And pretty much a lot of people, the West vilifies Putin. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, he wants to bring back the Soviet Union. He wants to bring back." No, Putin is a nationalist. He wants the self-interest of Russia, which, if you think about it, every leader of every individual country should be looking out for their country's self-interest and their people's self-interest. That's the way it's supposed to go. And then you have international commitments.
But at what
when it
cost,
comes to
though?
trade,
At what point do you say, okay, well, this is really good for our country, but we have to kill a bunch of people to, you know what I mean? They should be,
True, but
yes,
who's
but
been doing the killing?
Well, the United
Who's
States.
been doing the killing?
But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying Putin, but I'm just saying in general, more pointed at the United States than anybody else. That yes, that's their job, is to look out for their country. Although, I have other ideas about what governments are about, but we won't get into that. But I think they obviously have to weigh the cost when they do that, okay, well, yeah, we can do this, and this is going to be great for our country, like a lot of the things that the United States have been doing, like making deals with Saudi Arabia and OPEC, which is like making deals with the devil in a way, and doing that, and then having to kill probably millions of people in order to keep it going over the past, 40 years or whatnot, 30 years.
Yeah, when the Soviet Union fell, all of a sudden there was no more enemies. The U.S. found itself in a unique position as the only superpower in the world. And
they had to find some.
Exactly. When you created the quote-unquote military-industrial complex and this banking system, and you're the reserve currency, and you're the number one, the number one economy in the world. Well, it's as Caesar said, he wept because there are no more worlds to conquer. And so what ended up happening is that the neocons who were in charge, who had gotten into power in the bureaucracy during the Cold War, they passed the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which said that it is the purpose of the United States to ensure that no superpower ever gets to the point that they can challenge U.S. hegemony and U.S. supremacy. And that's why you've seen the vilification. This is why you've seen the proxy wars. The only reason that the U.S. went in and toppled Ukraine was to try to the whole intent was to put NATO forces right there on the border of Russia. They can care less about the Ukrainian people. As a matter of fact, there's been so much destruction, it's not even funny. But the thing that they discovered is that the U.S. is weak, the Obama administration is weak, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, is weak, and he lost in Syria. We lost people in Benghazi. and we wasted a year, quote unquote, attacking ISIS, and Putin goes in there and in less than 2 months eradicates them completely out of Syria and out of most of Iraq. So, we now are no longer seen as a strong peacekeeping, democracy, nation-building force that we used to be, or empire we used to be. We're really falling apart. And if you take a look at what the West is doing, and you talk about looking out for national interests, but that doesn't mean you don't have to make a fair deal with other countries. China has the military, has the population, has the manufacturing, has the production to pretty much dominate the world anytime they want. But what are they doing? They're creating free trade agreements, and they're not like the TPP and the TTIP, which is simply giving corporations sovereign power. No, they're offering. China says, you know what? The days of the dollar are dying. Most of the countries that they're creating these agreements with, you have resources, you may have gold, but you've got something to offer, and we want to trade directly in your currency, bilateral direct currency. But even then, that's really to get the foot in the door, because with the Shanghai Gold Exchange price discovery, it's going to start out slow, but it's really going to start, escalating as we get towards the end of the year. And the whole purpose is to destroy the Western control over gold prices. And once China is the sole arbiter of the price, that's when they're going to start backing trade agreements, letters of credit in gold, and then eventually bring about a global currency that's going to be backed in gold.
Right. So, I mean, and I think, to me, that's really, I'm not too fond of global anything, but having a currency that is backed in gold, to me, is a positive. I view that as a positive thing as opposed to a negative, because look at what's happening when you don't have a currency backed by gold. Well, I guess it's not just that; it's also the having a central bank as well. The two kind of go together, right?
Well, true. A central bank in itself is not bad, but a private central bank is where the detriment comes, because we had the Treasury has to have its own bank to be able to print currency, to be able to do international trade, to be able to receive tariffs, obviously taxes, income taxes they do that, but that was after the fact. But we had a national bank. Everybody's got their own national bank to control monetary policy, currencies, to do international trade, et cetera. And it was backed by gold. The mints, each of the mints that originally with country, there were San Francisco, Philadelphia, Denver, et cetera. They held, before everything was moved to Fort Knox, they controlled the gold in different areas. As a matter of fact, most people don't realize, but when the Federal Reserve was first created, there were 12 district offices, and there still are 12, but there were 12 district offices. One of the purposes behind that was? It's because because the United States was so big, each part of the United States had a different type of manufacturing. Okay? There was a lot of shipping and fishing that occurred on the West Coast. You had the financial center in New York.
Not to interrupt, but is that what
out of Oklahoma and Texas?
They based it on?
Other things that were coming. Atlanta was a big international port. So they had different Federal Reserve district offices, 12 of them, and back then they used to determine the interest rate for lending at each of the different offices. They were all different because the banking in one area may have required interest rates much higher than, say, banking down in Atlanta.
Right. Well, I know when you look at money,
they
right?
They did that because certain areas, it's like the housing bubble. Nevada, Arizona, California, a number of these places really got hit hard by the bursting of the housing bubble. But one place that didn't was New York. Okay, so New York didn't necessarily need a lot of this low interest rate.
Well, it was the places that were building
to be able to function their mortgages and lending.
Because it was the
But
places
it was
that were
definitely necessary here in the West to try to rebuild, that industry. So a lot of times that you have different interest rates in different places around the country. But when the New York Fed became extremely powerful, they took over, and that's why the Fed, Janet Yellen, that has a single interest rate and single discount lending rate coming from one single office that affects everybody in the country.
So
now.
when did that start? And I was I don't know if you could you hear me or
I couldn't hear you, but I was hearing a little feedback myself. But
okay, sorry about that. So everything sound okay now?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, good. No, I was saying, and I thought you couldn't hear me, that like you can, on the bills, it will tell you which Federal Reserve office it supposedly came from. At least it used to. I mean, it still tells you, but I don't know if it really came from there. Like, you'll have a letter and then you'll have a corresponding Federal Reserve bank like Boston or New York or San Francisco. Like, let me pull out I don't have a dollar on me right now, but you know what I mean?
Because it's tied to the mints that were tied to those Federal Reserve districts. Because before we had the Federal Reserve, we had the national mints, which were part of the Treasury, and the greenback, the dollar, the paper money. The paper money was a form of currency that you could walk into one of the mints and get $1 worth of gold or $1 worth of silver. When the Federal Reserve took over, we were still on the gold standard, and when they printed their money out, from 1913 going to about 1964, 1971, when they started printing their money out, that's when you had the gold certificates and the silver certificates. They were Federal Reserve currencies, and if you wanted gold and silver, you had to go to the Federal Reserve office in your, of the 12 district area. Then when we went off the gold standard, we had Federal Reserve notes because nothing is backed by gold and silver anymore. It's completely debt-based money.
Right. And that also angered all those countries that voted in the U.S. as the reserve currency. I was reading one of your other articles because there's a lot about what's going on with gold, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But one of them had to do with where all these countries, just for people that don't know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they keep U.S. dollars on hand because the majority of them trade in U.S. dollars. When one country is trading with another country, they'll trade in U.S. dollars because it's the reserve currency. And the same with OPEC. All oil that is sold from OPEC is bought in U.S. dollars. Although there are other countries that are trying to set up their own oil sales that have nothing to do with U.S. dollars. And I know that has to do with China and Russia trying to, and the BRICS nations and that whole thing. But the article I believe I was reading was there are trillions of dollars that are getting dumped back into the United States. And of course, That's not a positive thing for the dollar.
No, because here's the interesting thing that people don't understand. When the U.S. government borrows from the Federal Reserve, they sell the Federal Reserve these Treasury bills, and these Treasury bills have a certain yield and interest on them that the government has to pay back at some time. Normally, in almost every instance, what they do is they roll over the bills so that are the bonds so they don't have to repay them. But if interest rates are high, what that means? That means that the cost of borrowing is much, much higher. So if they say in April they have $5 trillion worth of bonds that are, a 10-year bond is matured. It's now been 10 years since it was issued. If the interest rate was, say, at 2 to 2.5% instead of at 0% interest, that means think of an additional 2.5% on $5 trillion. That's how much interest the taxpayers would then have to pay.
And of course, that's a lot of money when you're talking about that much. If you're looking at it individually, like, each one at a small amount. But as a whole, it's just like when we talked about, the negative interest rates and them being small. But when you're talking about billions of dollars, it's not small anymore.
Exactly. And it's amazing how they can just, talk about trillions as if it's nothing. Gosh, I remember when $1 billion was, just unfathomable. Now trillions, and if you think of all the derivatives, put those together, you got 1.5 quadrillion.
Yeah, it's really crazy how you have the debt that they have now, and you have these people that think it's not a big deal. I remember listening, of course, they're progressives, but listening to Serious Progressive, which I used to listen to basically to get what is the White House planning on doing, because it seemed like that's what they promoted. The real agenda of, the globalists and whatever. But they brought up, and I brought this up before, that, well, the United States as a country is not like, your personal home budget. And it's like, well, yeah, it's not, because they can print their own fucking money. But at the same time, it is, in the sense that money has to be paid back, and you still have to balance your budget, and all of these things like that are the same. Yes, it's not the same in that they can print their own fucking money, but that's the only difference to me. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are there, but I mean, it still has to be balanced, and you still can't run up 19 trillion or 20 trillion in debt like they've done. That's insane. They could never pay that off.
Well, they have no intention of paying it off.
Right. They're just going to be in debt forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the United States pretty much has been in debt forever for the most part.
They're
right?
going to go through until a default. Okay. And
and how long is that going to take?
That's a great question. See, this is one of the reasons why over the past 5 years you've had Russia and China create an oil agreement where oil is going to be start selling in yuan. Iran, once they were removed from sanctions, they made an agreement with Russia for military backing, and then they told the United States, we're going to sell our oil in euros. Saudi Arabia just threatened, because of the 28 pages of 9/11, Saudi Arabia just threatened the Obama administration, and they said, hey, we're going to dump $750 billion worth of U.S. denominated assets. What do you think of that if you reveal that? Speaking
of the 28 pages of 9/11, my opinion on that is that, because first of all, if you look at it, why would the Saudi Arabian government want to do something to the United States based on their relationship for the past 30 plus years? They'd only want to do it for one reason, and that would be if the United States wanted them to. So, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I would say that Saudi Arabia, if they were behind anything, their government was actually behind it, which they probably were, what they're saying, these 28 pages. And who knows? I don't know what to believe anymore and what not to believe. It's hard to filter things out. But I would say that it's all backed by the CIA or whatever government organization, some secret organization that, to cover it up, had Saudi Arabia do it. So worst comes to worst, they can always blame Saudi Arabia. But that was their cover, as opposed to having the United States be more open to, more deniability in that case.
Well, you got to remember this: Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Syria, of course. The Islamic world is not one homogenous thing.
Right. I mean, they fight amongst each other.
Right. There are the Kurds, there are the moderates, there are the Baathists, there are the Shiite, there are the Sunni. There are in the Sunni there's the Wahhabists and the more moderates, and it's like the Sunni Muslims that are in Qatar or the UAE are much different than the ones that are in Saudi Arabia, where it's like 7th century. Women can't drive, women can't go around without a veil. You get your hands cut off and you get executed on Friday during evening prayers. The UAE, you can actually drink. It's funny, during Desert Storm back in 1992, that was the big joke, is, a lot of us were stationed over in Riyadh when the thing was going on, and we just take a hop over to UAE because then you could drink alcohol, but you can't drink alcohol in Saudi Arabia. So everything's split about. And in amongst those, you also have different factions amongst the royal family. Osama bin Laden, their family was
He's
one of the
originally
biggest
from Saudi Arabia.
Right. And so you have the construction that they did, and you have certain families that are funding Al-Qaeda, funding the Mujahideen, funding ISIS, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say the government, well, the government is so compartmentalized. It's got hundreds and hundreds of princes, and each of those princes has their own little, cabal of individuals. Well, there's some that may hate the great Satan. There's some that may hate Iran. There's some that may hate Israel. You never know.
But they all know that it's not a benefit to them if something happens with the oil production. I mean, the reason why they're living, a lot of them, right? I know not all of them are living off the oil, but I would think the majority of them, the princes and the kings, or whatever. I know you were saying before that, like you're saying now, that they have all these princes and it's all kind of they fight over shit like that and whatnot. But I would still think that for them to do it on their own, and then also reading that they needed people within the United States to help them, and there was help, and that along with all the other information. I mean, it's not just that alone.
Right.
Not just looking at that alone.
Here's the thing. Carrying over the last thing I was talking about. When you have so much division, that's perfect, ripe opportunity for intelligence agencies to exploit those divisions.
Right.
You get somebody who's a religious fanatic and hates Israel or hates Iran or hates Sunnis or hates Shiites or whatever, and they've got a following and they've got money. Then you can easily send in a covert, operator from either Mossad or CIA or MI6, whatever, and just cultivate that. That's how we got Osama bin Laden. He was part of the Mujahideen,
right? Well,
that was fighting in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and they created Al Qaeda. The United States created Al Qaeda. There's no arguing that. That's a fact. And they came out of the Mujahideen. So it's no matter how it started, to me, there's no doubt that it originated somehow from whether it was the CIA or one of these organizations within the United States government.
Right. The other thing you got to look at is the House of Saud, which ruled Saudi Arabia, was created in the following World War I and the end of the Ottoman Empire. It was created by the Brits. Okay, they wanted nation states because they could exploit the nation states rather than one big empire. So they broke the Ottoman Empire into Persia and Iraq and Syria and Palestine and all of those. They did that after the Ottoman Empire fell. Well, Saudi Arabia, of course, they put it up. They propped up they took a bunch of nomads and Berbers in the Sahara Desert, and they just propped them up in this king to rule a nation state. So once they did that, and then of course when the oil crisis came, the oil crisis was actually started because the U.S. had gone after the gold standard, and 2 years later the dollar was worthless. The Saudis and OPEC didn't want it, so they said, we're not going to sell you oil for dollars that we don't want. And that's when Kissinger went over there and created the petrodollar system. And now here's the thing about the 28 pages. I have no idea what's completely on them, but it's scary. It's scaring the Saudis enough because there's a sort of rule in international play is that sovereign nations are normally protected or given immunity from civilian lawsuits and demands like that. So if the 28 pages were done, Congress was going to pass a law removing immunity from Saudi Arabia, and you'd have all these 9/11 victims suing the Saudi government. Now, here's the kicker. Here's what Saudi Arabia, why they wanted to dump their $750 billion worth of treasuries and dollar-denominated assets if it was released, because once it's released, the immunity of the nation is done. All these people go to court. Of course, the U.S. courts are going to say
you can't enforce it.
Yeah, that's the kicker. You can enforce it in a way. All these lawsuits would go through. The U.S. courts would pass them. The Saudi government would ignore them, but where do they keep all their money? In U.S. banks, in London banks, in Swiss banks. And what is the U.S. very good at? Freezing assets and doing sanctions.
Yes.
Just like they did Iran for 10 years. So the Saudi government would be
never mind Iran.
done.
They do it to people here for over $10,000 for small amounts of money. Never mind what they do for billions. So yeah.
Well, they question it.
You're right.
They don't freeze it, but they question it. But they freeze
no,
it.
but they take it. They'll take your fucking money. I was listening.
They won't take it out of your banks, but they will take it if you carry it. Yeah, it's called civil forfeiture.
Yeah, but they'll take it without even charging you with a crime. I've read a bunch of articles where people with businesses have had their money stolen by the federal government, and it's been an amount of money that essentially if you hire between lawyers' fees and all of this shit, it's not even worth it to try to get it back if it's, 10, 20,000. So they know
you're right.
that they're not going to even bother. So no, they've been doing that shit too, and not even charging people with crimes. It's crazy. And I was listening to Glenn Beck this morning. Once in a while, I listen to him. He's the only one I can continue to stand over these fucking conservatives. But he had mentioned that he was talking to somebody who I guess is an expert and who's saying, the same shit, take all your money out of the bank. But he even said, when you take your money out of the bank, keep the fucking receipt, because what they might do is they'll find your money and they'll say, hey, this could be drug money. We're going to take this.
Right.
And they're not going to charge you with a crime. They're just going to take your fucking money, and you can tie it up in court for years if you want and go hire a lawyer and go through that whole thing. But they were even saying, keep your receipts. So
no, it's a guarantee. And here's the thing. There was a, if you take a look at some of these lawsuits, and if somebody wants to Google and take a look at civil forfeiture,
it's insane.
You're right. They don't charge a person with the crime. They charge the property with the crime. You'll see these lawsuits.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well.
The United States versus Philadelphia House,
or the business,
or the United States versus $12,500 US.
Yeah, it will be. They'll do it because they'll do it with businesses a lot, where they'll say that because they have the law that structuring of deposits where, if you try to avoid, I guess it's over $10,000 that the bank you have to fill out a thing, and the bank has to fill something out that notifies the U.S. government. So if you deposit it in a way, and even if you don't do it on purpose, if they believe, quote unquote, that you're depositing it in a way to avoid those flags, then they can say that you did that as well. And there they can even charge you with a crime. But sometimes they won't, because they know they don't have a case, but they'll take your money and kind of blackmail you and say, hey, we could charge you with a crime, but we're just going to take your money. And they've done that with a lot of shit. Sorry, go ahead.
And see, here's what I do in that case. You're absolutely right. If you had, say, $30,000 in the bank, and you were ready, you knew that either negative interest rates are coming or the banks could possibly collapse and default, and they're going to do a bail-in.
You should have it out
yada, yada.
already. So if you
Right.
have it there now, take it out tomorrow.
Well, hold on a second. The thing to do is, you're right. If you took out $30,000, one, they don't have it, so they probably say take 3 or 4 or 5 days. Two, you'd have to fill out the forms that it's more than $10,000 that you're dealing with. Three, they're gonna the law enforcement agencies are going to do it. This is why now, if somebody wants to take out close their account or take out a bunch of money, that's what something like Carrot Bars is absolutely beautiful for, because you're buying a commodity and you're moving it offshore. Okay. So what I would do in this case, I always tell people is sign up with Carrot Bars and then go take all your money and purchase it in gold, keep it offshore, but then they'll issue you a debit MasterCard, a gold debit MasterCard, so you can go ahead and liquidate it and spend it as you see fit. One, it's offshore, so they'll never bail it in. Two, it's in gold, which is, expected to accumulate in value as we head towards this global reserve currency or this gold-backed currency. Right. And three, you're not walking around with cash, so they can't. What are you going to do? They're going to civil forfeit you for a MasterCard.
Well, I had, and I'm still going to get into Carrot Bars. It's just every time I get, I don't want to go into this on the air, but it will just say financial issues that are over, but now I got to start resaving up my money. But anyway, at one point, I had like $15,000 in cash. But it wasn't like I took it all out at once. It was as I got my paycheck, I take out $500, $1,000 here, whatever I could save each check. So I didn't keep the receipts. And I even said that to myself. I'm like, if I took $15,000 and, used it as a down payment on a house or something, or saved up more and had like 30, even though it was over time, they're going to say, well, where did you get that money from? I'm going to say fucking working, just because I don't put it in a bank. It's like you're expected to put money in a bank, even though there is no benefit. Never mind even the, negative interest and the bail-ins and all of that. And from what I understand, too, with the bail-ins, that they had asked Ted Cruz on, speaking of Glenn Beck again, I think this was all on the same day. It might have been today or yesterday, that what he would do if they wanted to try to do a bail-in. And he said, well, I'm absolutely against it. I wouldn't let that happen. However, he has no control over it, because from what I understand, the banks already put all this stuff in motion where anybody with money in the bank has already agreed that if there is a bail-in, they essentially have already agreed to all that. And they probably don't even know it.
Well, it's Dodd-Frank. Congress already passed that banks have the right to do that. And then, of course, during a budget bill, an appropriations bill, Citibank was able to buy off congressmen so that they could put derivatives in there. So, those are people who think that the FDIC is going to pay insurance for your bank account if the banks collapse. Get in line behind $75 billion worth of or $75 trillion worth of derivatives with Bank of America, Citigroup, and J.P. Morgan, because they have first right of payoff.
Right, you'll never
That's why
get
you're
it.
going to get bailed in.
Well, because they expect the FDIC anyway, which, as we talked about before, the FDIC doesn't have even, anywhere near enough to pay off any of that money. So you'd never get it anyway. Right.
And so going back to the Saudis are feared, and here's the other reason why Obama already said he's going to veto it. Is because the 28 pages not only implicate the Saudis as funding and being a part of 9/11, they also implicate the United States. Okay? And so that's one reason. Another reason why those 28 pages will never see the light of day.
Well, that was my.
The United States is being involved in, because 9/11 was a three-pronged thing. 9/11 was a bank robbery. Okay, the world's largest bank was actually in Building 7. The second thing is that Larry Silverstein, who had bought the World Trade Centers, and just a few months before 9/11 had bought terrorist insurance. Now, who buys a terrorist insurance on buildings? But he did it a few months before, and he paid $600 to $700 million for the World Trade Center buildings, and got like $3 billion in insurance back. So
when did he buy the actual building compared to when he bought the terrorist insurance?
He bought the actual building probably a year to a year and a half before he bought the terrorist insurance, but he bought the terrorist insurance just 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that doesn't. I mean,
9/11.
I think I would understand, I guess, if initially getting terrorist insurance on a building like that, because it was bombed before in '93, even though it didn't really do much damage.
True.
So I understand that, but a couple months before sounds a little, fishy there.
Right. And but I think don't quote me, but it was either Larry Silverstein or somebody else. They got him on tape saying, bring it down now. And then all of a sudden Building 7 came down. So those two things. The third thing is to bring in a false flag attack so that they could implement the Patriot Act.
Oh, so of course, they had that sitting. They had that sitting around for I don't know how long, but all of that stuff that happened right after 9/11, everything they implemented, that was all ready to go. They were just waiting for something to happen. And I guess they either were sick of waiting. They're like, hey, nothing's going to happen. We're going to create it. But all that stuff, and this, I believe this has been admitted by the government. When I say the government, I mean, I've seen it in different documentaries that actually, I believe, validate it. But yeah, all that stuff was already ready to go. Like all those bills and the Department of Homeland Security and the restructuring and all of that shit. They were just waiting for an event that they could exploit to push it, just like they do with everything else. Just like Obama thought after Sandy Hook, he's like, there's no way. Do you notice, and not to change the subject, but just real quick, that when he was running for office, he didn't say shit about guns when he was running against Romney. So
he said he was a Christian.
Who? Obama?
Yeah, and he's as far Christian as a stone is from
right.
the river.
But he said years before that, his first run about Christians clinging to their guns or whatever. But in the election with Romney, he didn't say anything. He said when they asked him, he said, well, there's a lot of laws on the books. We just enforce those or something like that. So he kind of avoided the question, didn't really bring it up because, of course, he wanted those votes. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, literally, because I'm thinking he said that around September of 2012. So literally 3 months later, when Sandy Hook happened, because it happened December 2012, right? He goes and, thinks, well, now the event happened that I need, whether the government was behind it or not is a whole nother thing. But the event happened that I need to go out and ban what they call assault rifles. There's no such thing. But, ban these semi-automatic rifles and other things and ammunition. And, people can't possibly want to have guns after this. And that's what they do. They exploit everything they possibly can. And that's why so many people, not to mention the fact that there's been a lot of false flags, but every time something happens, you have people questioning it because politicians exploit everything they possibly can and they lie about everything they possibly can. So how can you not question things, and people will call people like Alex Jones or other people that, everything's a conspiracy crazy, but why would you believe what the government tells you? To question something, what is wrong with that in the first place? And the whole name conspiracy theory came out of the Kennedy assassination to try to discredit people, like even the prosecutor, Jim Garrison, who was the only person who ever prosecute a case against the murder of Kennedy, to make them sound crazy.
Oh, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's all a vilification, and it's all about anybody who critically thinks and questions. But this is the same cycle that happens throughout history. The people were supposed to be the government, but the people were also supposed to be the checks and balances against a tyrannical government. People over time, though, ended up, especially part of the problem is that a lot of the people who were the original, eyes on the government, they went west. Okay, they left from Ohio and Pennsylvania and from North Carolina, New York, and they decided to be pioneers in St. Louis, and they went west. So they were far away from the federal government, and the government was far away from them. But what ended up happening is we got to the 20th century, and all this, tens of millions of new immigrants came in. The city machines, we had the Daily Machine in the 20th century in Chicago. We had Boss Tweed in New York, the Tammany Hall. What they did was all of these immigrants are coming in. They didn't speak the language. They didn't have a job, and there were tens of millions of them. And there would be patrons. There would
not
be like
drink.
godfathers, not the drink or the pizza parlor, but there were godfathers for like the Italian Americans. There was a godfather for the Irish Americans. There was a godfather. The Jewish Americans, the Czechs, the Poles, everybody coming in. And all of those godfathers were controlled and bought off by Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall. And every time that they came in and they passed their citizenship test, the godfathers made sure they got jobs, that they paid, skimmed off some money and paid to the machine, and then they all voted for who the machine told them to vote for.
Well, I mean, I that I believe it goes back to the beginning of the government and that all governments are evil. But one thing I wanted to mention, yesterday I did a show on Prince and his death, but I focused more on opium. And you could buy opium from the Sears catalog. You could buy it anywhere, essentially, until 1914. And one of the reasons had nothing to do with the fact that, which I don't even believe it's that dangerous of a drug. As long as you're able to get it, it doesn't do any physical damage, long-term damage. If you actually read about it, the worst thing is probably like constipation. But essentially, I had watched this documentary, and essentially what they had said, what the historians had said was that before 1914, that's when they passed this Harris Law that essentially said that you need to pay a tax and that you got to get a prescription from a fucking doctor and you need to pay a tax. And being an addict is not sufficient enough to get a prescription. But what they said was this was the first time in history that the government had actually stopped people or passed a law, even though they really were violating the 10th Amendment, and I believe 9th Amendment as well, but had passed a law about what you can put in your body. Up until then, there were no laws that controlled what you could put in your body. I mean, there were religious rules.
You're missing something significant about that. Okay, the government wasn't the ones who instigated this. See, in the 1910s and 1920s, there was a temperance movement.
Well, it was
Molly Hatchet and all those.
It was the religious. I realized that there was a Charles. I forget I have his name down somewhere. It was basically part of it. First of all, one of the reasons was for opium was they were worried about, in California, the Chinese getting white women high on opium and turning them into hookers. And that was one of the reasons. But you had, when the United States took control of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War, you had this missionary who went over there, and he started this whole big thing and this whole big religious thing with all these different types of religions. Well, I mean, I think all under Christianity, but, you know, there's different sects or whatever. I don't know a lot about religion in general, but I know enough to...
Some of the Jesuits in that are more fervent and zealous than others.
Right.
I mean,
but,
that's what happened. That's what happened when the Spanish came over here to the New World.
But
they go ahead.
Oh, sorry. But the point being is that they started this whole thing where they wrote to President Roosevelt and started a whole big thing to ban all of these drugs. So that was part of it as well. But San Francisco passed a law in 1876, I believe. It was only in Chinatown. It wasn't anyplace else. That in Chinatown, opium was illegal because they thought that the Chinese were going to get white women high on opium and turn them into hookers. I mean, a lot of it was based on, and the whole drug war, at least according to this documentary on the History Channel, was Johnson was worried about the troops in Vietnam getting all fucked up off of drugs. And that's kind of how it started.
But it goes back and forth, you know.
It went back before that, but
the British Empire fought 2 opium wars.
Yeah, China, because China banned opium.
Right, because the Chinese, you know, you could say that opium doesn't do any long-term effects, but you know, the opium dens, you had something like 80% of the Chinese population was addicted.
It wasn't that high. They said it was something like either 2/3.
Okay, 67%, 80%, but 67%, that's fine. But when you have 67% of your
still
productive capacity
of
your working force or your military, or that strung out and addicted on drugs, okay? But see, these are the things that this is, you know, Hong Kong, the great financial center, was created by the British as sort of a tax haven for drug running, for the opium drug running.
Right, and I know that the British, the opium wars were because China tried to ban opium, and really they weren't successful because the U.S. said they were going to help when Roosevelt was president, the first Roosevelt. And from what I understand, the way they ended opium use was when it essentially became a dictatorship and a communist, and they would kill you if you were caught with opium.
Yeah, Mao Zedong came in there in 1949, and said,
they would just kill you. So, but at the same time, in the U.S., they estimated it not just opium, but all drugs altogether as about 5%. So it really wasn't that it was a huge issue. It was more about other things. And, you know, again, going back to the fact that the government, it was the first time the government actually came in, not only violated the Constitution. Technically, they're saying they didn't because they're saying, well, we didn't make it illegal. We just said you have to pay a tax and get a prescription, or they didn't call it a prescription. They called it something else. But they still, the way I see it, it's the same as a gun. It's you're violating the Constitution if you require people to get permits. But up until that point, people cared more. And you even look at alcohol, where alcohol, they had to pass an amendment to ban it. And I think alcohol is worse than opioids, in my opinion. It depends, I guess, what it is, you know, if you're getting street heroin. However, if it wasn't illegal, you wouldn't be getting the crap that the people are getting and ODing on. So there's two sides to it. But alcohol is insane as far as I'm concerned.
that's why what's going on in Colorado is a much better way about it. If you're gonna legalize it into an aspect, at least regulate it.
I don't think it should be regulated. Period, because it's not.
Well,
it's not up to the government to determine what to put in your body.
So when you get a bunch of bad street drugs out on there that's cut with cyanide and cut,
but it wouldn't be if it was
and
legal. That's the whole thing.
Huh?
If it was legal, what would happen is it would be the same way it was in 19 whatever, where you had I guess the company was Coca-Cola. I don't know if another major company owned it. They put actual cocaine in Coca-Cola.
Actually, that's a misnomer. Cocaine was a byproduct of the process. They didn't. They didn't
take like actual make cocaine and put it in there, but they put the coca leaves and the what was used.
And the process, when you boil it up, just like when you see those documentaries on how cocaine is made, they take
they didn't do that.
They put type of acid on it, and those poor natives have to walk all over it and cause the process to churn out, and then they dry it and powder. Well,
they didn't.
Same thing with. It's kind of funny. Most of the sodas, Coca-Cola and all that, they were created as formulas from the pharmacists that you were talking about.
Yeah, and they
those drugstores where you could get morphine and opium and all that. Those guys were chemists as well as pharmacists, and they put together and they just create these sodas, and they did it primarily during Prohibition, because they couldn't sell liquor anymore.
Right. And then they had
an alternative.
Heroin was marketed as a cough suppressant as well at the time. But yeah, I know they didn't actually take cocaine and put it in there, but the leaves, because they used to chew on the leaves and it wouldn't give you the same effect, I guess, that cocaine would give you. But that's a whole nother issue. My point being, though, is just that the fact that up until that time, the government hadn't stepped in and told people what they could put in their bodies. And you had 140 something years where they hadn't done that. And then they did.
But you're missing something. During the 19th century, you've heard of the snake oil salesman? Okay, without any type of regulation, did you ever read the book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair?
No.
About the meat packing plants?
I'm familiar with it.
Where they throw rats.
I'm familiar with it, but no, I didn't read it.
And they chop up the people, and they just didn't bother to. If you don't have any type of regulation at all, in some inspection, okay, then greedy people, because the heart of man is wicked, greedy people will just go ahead.
Right, but that doesn't have to be done by the government. The same way that you could have inspection firms that certify. Look at all of these things that are inspected by the FDA that get recalled all the time. So, I mean, and plus they could be corrupt as well. But if you had a bunch, what would happen is in a free market, and really market is the people. I don't know how people kind of like to manipulate that, but when I'm talking about a free market, and letting the market determine things, it's really letting the people determine things by their buying patterns and what they decide to buy. But what you would have is, and this is thinking outside the box, which a lot of people don't do, but what you would have is you'd have a bunch of them, not a bunch, but maybe you'd have 3 or 4. You'd have companies that's what they do. You'd have an FDA not under the government. And you'd have a couple of them because they'd be competing, and people would say, how do I know that your restaurant is, up to par? Or how do I know that your meat is? Or, how do I know this? And that's where, just like you have those ratings companies, which are not run by the government, which were corrupt, which fucked up the whole housing market, you would have independent companies, and then people would decide, what's the most upstanding, or like credit reports. Those aren't government agencies neither. So the same way you have all those, and I don't want to get into a big, long conversation about this, but the same way you would have those, you could apply that to any other industry. And it would be free market without the government interfering. So that's what I'm saying.
You could, but let's take a look at the banking industry. Okay, you've got the CFTC, which regulates the commodities exchange. You have the SEC, which regulates securities,
and they're all corrupt.
The stock market. But you also have an independent, non-governmental one called FINRA. Okay, the Financial Regulation Agency. It is private, and it's funded by tax on Wall Street or whatever. But guess what? FINRA was implicated in allowing the banks to do the mortgage fraud.
But
the problem is this.
So was all of these other agencies, the government agencies, they all knew what was going on and didn't do anything neither.
Then what does that tell you? There is no utopia. The people.
Oh, of course. Nobody's saying that there is.
People will be greedy, will steal, will seek power, seek authority if that opportunity comes in.
Nobody's saying right.
Cheap.
But the difference is you at least have competition, whereas when it's the government, it's a total monopoly. So if you have a corrupt, and I'm not saying it's perfect because it's not, and I don't have all the answers to everything neither. Neither did the founding fathers, and neither did the government when the Constitution was implemented. But what I'm saying is that at least you have competition where anybody can get into that industry, as opposed to the government has a monopoly on force. You can't hire your own police department. They do. They have a monopoly on so many different things that they have no incentive to get better. They have no incentive not to be corrupt. They have no incentive for anything because you can't go anyplace else.
I mentioned the meatpacking industry, and if it hadn't been for the FDA and stepping in 1905, then we would, the meat packers would have just gone in and they didn't care if they killed people. But here's something else. In the 19th century, we had the great Industrial Revolution. Okay, and we had the great robber barons, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, who would ruthlessly control and destroy all competition because they could buy off everybody and they could run people out. And there was a private police force known as the Pinkertons. And they used the Pinkertons. They would hire them out. And if there was some striking miners, they'd go in there with guns and kill the miners. Well, I
wouldn't call them a police force. That would be people that they privately hired to go and do what they want. Yeah, private investigators.
If it wasn't until...
But they didn't have the power of the government.
Right. But who's going to regulate? If you've got money, you've got power, and you've got arms, military force behind you, who can stop you? Competition, they crush competition. This is why all of these, Standard Oil was the only oil company in there. And then they controlled the railroads. And then they controlled shipping. There was about
right, and look what's going on now.
Every single industry in the world.
Look at the media. I mean, I don't want to continue to keep, because it's just going to be the same thing back and forth. But basically, right. I mean, it was a different time, and at the same time,
my point is this: still, whether the government does it or you let people do it themselves, the results are the same. Man is man. There is no utopia.
No, there's no there's no utopia.
Man does not walk in this moral thing from birth.
No, there's no utopia, but there is a way to do it, one, without force and without forcing people to do things and for them to make their own decision. And that's the difference. And the other difference is the competition where there's not a government monopoly. So if it's just as bad, I'd rather have the decision to go with who is the least bad of all of them. And I'd rather not be forced by gunpoint to do it. because you look at the police and what they do, and it's not just murdering people, it's harassment and all of this stuff. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of experiences with police, and 99.9% of them bad. And
I agree.
And whether it's just fucking with you or whatever.
The political and government side is its own oligarchy, but without any type of authority, public authority, then you'd have the Wild West, where one rancher who would control the town, the city, the good old boy system, and drive everybody bankrupt, steal their cattle, or do all that.
Maybe that would be the case 100 years ago. I don't necessarily think that would be the case now. I think things are a lot different. I think it would take some
because
time.
We had 100 years of scare tactics by the federal regulation.
Well, but at the same time, there's things like the internet. There's a lot of different types of guns that can fire like they couldn't in the 1800s. But even just looking at and maybe even back then you would have the same results. But what happens with government, the problem, and if somebody can tell me a way to fix this, then fine. Once you give power to somebody over you, they are going to become corrupt, and they are going to expand until they totally take over. So I don't know. I don't think there's no utopia. However, even if it goes in a circle where it goes from government to no government, back to government, and you start at the beginning, governments have to be torn down at some point, totally. And the United States government at this point is too powerful to continue to exist. And I believe that there shouldn't be that's why I don't believe in government. And yes, maybe what would happen was eventually there'd be another government after that. And it starts slowly, and they take some power and more power, and then they get torn down, and the same thing would happen again. And there is no perfect form of society or whatever you want to call it. It's not there's no utopia. There's nothing perfect. I'm not saying that. But again, what I'm saying is I'd rather live in a society where I have a choice, where I'm not being forced, and that there's not a monopoly over force at the same time. So that's where that's coming from. But I know, we pretty much that kind of just goes back and forth when we get into those conversations.
Yeah, you're the idealist, and I'm the pragmatist.
But at the same time, I'm not saying that it will be perfect. Look how bad things are now. I don't think it would be any worse. It might be a little better, but I don't think it would be any worse. So worst case, it would be the same. What's
kind of funny is back in the time of when we just had the original 13 states, the colonies became states.
Yeah, where there was like a population of like 6 million.
Yeah. What ended up happening was originally they gave the Native Americans, because the Native Americans don't believe in individual property. They believe that
they're like
the
nomads,
land and the people, right? And so they were given these massive swaths of land in Florida, in Georgia, and a few other places, okay? And they said this is, it was like the first reservation, but it wasn't an official reservation. And a lot of the Native American tribes actually started integrating into the white man world. They call them the four civilized tribes: the Seminole, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, and a few others. But that wasn't good enough. And it was not the government who came in and stole their land and did the Trail of Tears. It was the people there, the individuals who didn't want to live in communion with the Native Americans, and they said, we want that land. And they went crying to the government saying, and lied about atrocities and the government stepped in because the people demanded it. See, this is what I'm saying is the government is the arm that does something, but most of the time it's the people that demand these things, and the government just reacts to what the people demand.
Yeah, but usually
you'll find evil people everywhere.
Right, but usually when it's the people, it's a very small percentage. It's just a percentage that's being heard. It's not,
that's true.
It's the ones writing letters and doing all this shit. And usually that's a tiny percentage of the population. So it's not what the majority of people want. Plus, you should never have a country as big as the United States under one government. It's just to have a country with that many people.
Remember, we were supposed to be states run.
Right.
And it wasn't until after the Civil War. By the way, do you know
that even some of the states are too highly populated, like California, Texas, New York. I mean, there shouldn't be any government that controls that amount of people, first of all. I don't think there should be any government, period. But if there is, there's no way there should be a government that has more than 1 million people under its control. I mean, that's just too.
Yeah, but that's also why
many.
You have local. You have city and county.
But it doesn't. It doesn't. Whether it worked that way years ago, it doesn't work that way anymore. But I want to take a quick break. Is there any way you could stay a little longer?
Yeah,
okay.
I'll say 15, 30 minutes after.
Okay, cool.
It was my fault. I was got on late anyway. I was working outside.
Then it was kind of my fault about the Skype thing. I think what I did was I'm trying to get my effects processor that I've had for now like 8 months to work correctly. To be hooked up correctly. It works, but it's only working on one side. And I might have hooked up the wrong cable when I did it. So my microphone or my mixer is not going back properly to the computer. So that's probably what it is. But after the show, I'll get that fixed. So next time Skype will be okay. So we'll take not a quick break, but because I need a little break here. My kind of got stressed out at the beginning there. But anyway, when we come back, we got lots more to talk about. Still some other stuff with gold, and I'm sure, Ken, you have some things that you want to bring up as well. So
Bitcoin.
Check us out. Check Ken out at thedailyeconomist.com. A lot of important stories there, and definitely follow Ken. Do you also have an RSS feed where you can automatically get your articles?
Well, that's why I use the Daily Economist, because it RSS's Rogue Money, theexaminer.com, and then, of course, besides the one I individually
Secrets of the Fed, I know you're on there, too.
Yeah, I put those on there. So you get all three at one site. That's the best place to go, is just the dailyeconomist.com.
And you can, and then you just, is there
on the right side? On the right side is RSS in the
I see it.
Right?
I see it. Yeah,
and then below that's the Examiner.
And then you get all those articles. Okay, cool. Because these are definitely things that you want to keep track of and know what's going on with. I think too many people don't really care, not only about the geopolitics, but definitely with the economy as well. And of course, Ken goes into things that you're not going to hear on government media, and things that are going to affect your life a lot more than the fucking stupid presidential election, which is rigged anyway. So definitely check out his site there, or sign up. Just click on the RSS feed so you can get those automatically. And you can check out our show at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. You can also get every show we've ever done. I think we're up to 290 now. It actually was our official 2-year anniversary, I think, a couple years ago. So we've been doing this 2 years now. So I'm not sure exactly when you came on, but you've been on a while. I know that. It's been more than a year, probably a year and a half or something like that. So you can get any of those shows. You can get any of the old shows that Ken was on, or any of the old shows any of our guests were on. We've had a lot of, when it comes to, I guess, libertarians, we've had a lot of guests on that are well-known, like Mark and Ian from Free Talk Live, Adam Kokesh, my mind is totally going blank right now. But Darrell W. Perry, who's running for president of the Libertarian Party. So we've had a lot of Pete Eyre, of one of the founders of Cop Block, the whole thing, not just one little cop block. So we've had a lot of great guests on, libertarian guests at least. So you could always go back and listen to one of those. So we'll be right back after this. Nonpartisan libertyforall.com.
Hi, my name is Brett, and I'm currently recovering from a dangerous and extreme belief system. A belief system that if I had not taken action, most likely would have landed me in jail or even a mental institution. This belief system has many names, but it is most often referred to as libertarianism. For years, I would frighten ordinary people with long rants about the non-aggression principle. That's the central ethical stance in libertarianism, which asserts that the initiation of physical force against persons or property, or the threat of such force, is inherently illegitimate, regardless of what kind of excuses somebody makes up to aggress. I know. When I hear myself say it out loud today, I realize how crazy I once was. But I've made a lot of progress. Through my exposure to new points of view and sources of information, I've realized that I was being just too optimistic about the huge group of people who live their lives peacefully and mind their own business, and too cynical about the tiny group of people who disregard these utopian notions of non-aggression, property rights, and self-ownership in order to keep us safe and maintain stability. Even though a lot of the time it does seem like they have no problem treating our communities and the entire planet like their own personal f***ing whoa. I'm sorry. Still trying to let go of some of this negative imagery. Like I said, recovery is a process. But it wasn't just the flaws in libertarian thinking, it was also the dangers. This occurred to me one day when somebody who lives in the real world asked me the question, what would you do if you woke up tomorrow and government was gone? I had never thought about it before, and at that point a terrifying worst case scenario started to play out in my mind. And before I was even halfway through this imaginative what-if scenario, things got so dark that I was forced to swear off the philosophy of liberty for good. Because of the difficult economic situation, we would have to assume that there would be a significant spike in property crime, theft, and looting. Now, libertarians might try to argue that property owners would demand protection services and somebody would quickly rise up to meet that demand. But I think things would be a little too chaotic for that. Now, imagine this: a sudden and enormous increase in violence. The first kind of violence would be property owners trying to defend what is theirs, which libertarians would argue, rightfully so, that they have a right to do. But friends, this is a worst-case scenario. So, there would also be a rise in violent crime in furtherance of theft, and things would quickly spin even more out of control. Now, libertarians might again argue at this point that whatever violence or theft is taking place would be far less than what the state was carrying out the very day before. But don't worry, my fellow non-libertarians, I'm about to make this scenario much, much worse in my imagination. Even if most people turned out to be peaceful and capable of rational thought and recognize that violence is totally impractical, there's always going to be bad people. And they would have decided, for whatever reason, that they were going to continue going around and enacting random violence on whoever they want to get whatever they need. Now, at this point, again, the libertarian would chime in and say those kinds of thugs would be drastically outnumbered by peaceful and cooperative people. But in the worst-case scenario, these violent actors wouldn't stop just because they were outnumbered. They would band together. They would carry out their violence in predation against the people in groups to increase their chances of success. And what we would have over time, maybe it would take a few weeks, maybe it would take a few months, maybe even a few years, groups of these violent marauders going around finding communities filled with peaceful and productive people getting along and living their lives, and they would go in and kill them all and take their stuff. And I can already hear the libertarians saying that is so stupid. If these violent marauders killed all the productive people, they would die off themselves. Since they don't know how to do anything besides violence, they would eventually starve or run out of resources. And that would be the end of it. But I'm one step ahead of you. See, over time, we have to assume that the marauders, the thugs, would get smarter. And after several bands of these thugs had died from starvation or lack of resources because they killed all the people who knew how to do and get all the stuff, they would realize that when they raid a village, they have to leave some productive people alive so they can come back later and take the new stuff that they made. And over time, they would actually develop even more subtle and efficient methods of exploiting their victims. Instead of roaming around or periodically going back to a village and killing more people and taking more stuff, sooner or later, they would just move in and live amongst the productive people. See, in the worst case scenario, they would be really diabolical. Instead of all this back and forth, surprise, here we are again, within a few years, people would just be used to them. And they would also get used to the fact that when they want to, these thugs are going to take their stuff. Maybe rough them up a little bit. It's getting pretty bad, isn't it, libertarians? Well, guess what? It gets worse. From the darkest corners of my fear-filled imagination comes this idea. What if these thugs, these predators, were so clever that eventually they realized that their little system could continue unabated if they just bribed the people? You see, after the thugs took everything they wanted for themselves and gave whatever they wanted to their friends, what if they just took whatever was left and offered it as kind of like a kickback to the productive people in the community? We are your masters. But if you tolerate that, maybe once in a while we'll throw up a new building here or a new bridge over there, some pavement down over there. So why don't we just continue along with this little arrangement, because, as you already know, we are really awesome at violence. And if you don't agree, we can still just kill you. Remember, like how we used to do. I know this all sounds sick, but these kinds of people are out there, libertarians. You're going to have to face that. You know what else? If they were really clever, they would scare the people into compliance. Not with their own violence all the time, but they could actually threaten the people with the violence of other gangs. They could say, hey, yeah, we might be violent, but guess what? We're not the most violent gang out there. A couple towns away, there's an even more violent gang. And if we weren't here, they would come here and kill all of you. We're actually protecting you from them, so you're welcome. And once you bring the emotion of fear into it, it's over. People wouldn't be able to reason anymore, and this gang would now be there for good. Now, at this point, again, the libertarian chimes in and says, people are smarter than that. And sooner or later, somebody would stand up, if not many people, somebody would stand up and say, this is insulting. This is bribery. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be robbed in exchange for little petty favors that could probably just as easily, if we put some thought into it, be done by the community. And I don't want to accept all of this robbery and threats just because of some scare story about some other violent gang that could come here. There's a violent gang already here. And the people would agree, and there would be an uprising, and that would be the end of it, says the libertarian. But I got some bad news. These groups of predators, the existence of which has apparently never even occurred to people who want to live in some kind of libertarian utopia, they've got one more trick up their sleeve in the worst case scenario, and this one is a doozy. Now, for this last one, you'll have to bear with me because this sounds so ridiculous and far-fetched, I'm not even exactly sure how this would come to be. But imagine this. The thugs somehow convince the people to surrender control of the channels of information, communication, and education to the gang itself. Again, I don't know how that happens, but in the worst case scenario, you have to think that it could be possible. Maybe they go after the children. Yeah, they bribe parents. People are already used to bribes with free daycare. I know it doesn't sound like something that good people would allow to happen, but if enough time had passed, these people would have become pretty habituated to dependence on the gang. As daycare becomes more sophisticated and better funded, the children are forced to stay there longer and longer. They are fed a new language and subsequently a new way of thinking about the predators. Instead of describing the relationship accurately with words like theft and threats, they're given new words that distort reality. First couple generations, it might be tough, but after that, the kids would come home, they would complain, they would talk about how terrible it is, they would talk about how much it sucks, and the parents could just dismiss it by saying something like, hey, we all have to do it. And even though this worst-case scenario, I admit, is very far-fetched, the libertarians at this point would have to admit that within a generation or two, the violent predators would have no more significant problems managing their herds of peaceful and productive people. They might have to deal with the occasional rogue who questions their authority or their legitimacy, but probably not even directly. After a while, the indoctrinated people would do that for them. They would say, without the violent gang, and it wouldn't be called that anymore, they would have thought of a new name for it, who would maintain order? Who would take care of the children? Who would protect us from violent people who want to do us harm? Who would keep our food supply safe? As my worst-case scenario vision of this anarchistic world grows even darker, other groups of thugs recognize the success that this gang has had, and they copy that model. It is replicated all over the world. Even as their control over the people stabilized, the gangs would still be plenty violent. They would fight with each other. Here's a really sad thing. Because of the messages that all the people were absorbing in daycare, they would actually cheer when the gang that preys on them slaughters a group of people that another gang preys on. It could get that bad. But if this got bad enough and continued long enough, the entire world would just become divided up into these gang territories. And at this most tragic ending, a good person, a hardworking and peaceful person who just wanted to live his or her life free of coercion, would realize that there is no place on earth that they could go. The end. Wait a minute.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. He was a really great interviewer. David Bourne, I think. It's Dave from Nevada.
Well, it's a really good one.
One of our listeners. Dave obviously has, a little greater skill set. And he is a talented interviewer. David Bourne, I think. I don't know if I'm right about that.
And we are back. Nonpartisan liberty for all. We are here with the great Ken Schortgen. Just a reminder, tomorrow night, Katie Reyes will be joining us again this Thursday, and we will be talking about traditional roles in the family between men and women, among other things. Also, the history of, or some of the history regarding how the war on poverty helped to destroy the family as well in a different way. So we'll be talking about a number of topics related to the family. So be sure to tune into that tomorrow, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and 7 o'clock Arizona time, as Arizona is now on the same time, which Ken knows because he lives there.
Yeah, exactly. The time spot rushed up to me. I didn't even have to change the clock.
Yeah, that's kind of cool from that aspect. The only thing that would bother me is, like, if you had a show that was on at a certain time, like, does it not come on now at the same time? Or like a game or something like that, say like, and I don't watch baseball anyway, but say like baseball games are on at like 7 o'clock, and now they're on at 6 o'clock or on at 8 o'clock, depending on which way you're going. Like shit like that.
Well, it actually came to my benefit one time. It was around New Year's, and the NFL playoffs were going on, and my brother and I decided to take a trip up to Vegas to bet on the sports books. And if you take a look at the map, Las Vegas is virtually directly north of Phoenix. I mean, it's not very far off.
Yeah, but, I've been to Phoenix. Well, the Phoenix area.
We were on Mountain Standard Time at the time, and we were rushing up there, and all of a sudden we got into Vegas, and looking at our clocks, oh my God, 15 minutes. We're not going to be able to make it in time. And then we passed one of those bank clocks that was going by, and it was 1 hour earlier. So we were like, oh, that's right. We crossed into Pacific time.
Right.
So we were okay with that.
Well, that's a positive thing.
Yeah, it was to our benefit on that day. But no, for the most part, I love the summer and Pacific time because, if during NFL Monday Night Football starts at like 5:30 instead of 6:30, and so in football, if you want to watch college,
I love football on Pacific time. Because I used to live in the East.
9 a.m.
Yep.
Yeah, first game's at 9 a.m. And because of the Hawaii games and the West Coast games.
When they play in England, occasionally they have like a game in like Europe, and then that will be on at like 8 in the morning or something. But sorry, go ahead.
They got crap teams like the Lions versus the Dolphins there.
Well, no, I'm talking about college. Sometimes we'll play in England, and they'll be on pretty early.
Yeah, well, not very. You're not going to get the big teams play there, so who cares? But for the most part, take out the anomalies like London. You get to start football at 9 a.m.
9 o'clock,
and the West Coast, like Hawaii games, are on until 1 in the morning. So
it's pretty cool.
If you love college football, that's the best time.
Yeah, I love the fact that compared to Eastern time. I would hate to go back to Eastern time because it sucks with sports. Football really being the only sport that I follow now, but college football being the biggest of them. And I like that it starts at 9 in the morning. And I used to get up, when I was really into it. I still am, but not as much, just because a lot of the bullshit with government and shit like that, and some of the shit that ESPN does and whatever. But college, I look at it a little different than pro. But I used to get up, 8 in the morning to watch the show on ESPN. There's a name of the show, I forget, but
College Game Day.
Yes, College Game Day. I would get up and watch that. Then, I'd watch a 9 o'clock game and 12 o'clock game, and I'd watch football pretty much all day because I'd be betting on it. So I would flip around and find the, different games and kind of analyze teams. And I even put together a database when I was out of work, when I got laid off, that kind of had all that data in it. And I didn't really even end up using it, but yeah. So I pretty much don't really bet football anymore. So, I just watch it for the fun of it. But I'm not watching as many games as I used to. And
of course, when you and I hooked up in Vegas a few months back, we got to see that incredible Pittsburgh-Denver game. And I got the cash from that one for sure.
Yeah, I know you had won one of your parlays there. But I used to bet like 4 games a week, like $100, and I used to do really good too. But that was a while ago. So now, and I've had UNLV season tickets for the past 2 years, and then the year before that, I just bought tickets to most of the games. So I kind of just focused on more, I'd catch games during the day, and then I'd be getting ready for the UNLV game if they were playing at home. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that this year, and I need to do it before January 1st if I want to get like my discounts and my same seats and all that. So,
well, yeah, but pretty soon there's a possibility you may have to become a Raider fan.
Well,
I am a Raider. Are looking to move to.
I am a Raider fan.
To move to Vegas.
Now that you mention it, I am actually a Raider fan because I used to want to move to LA when I was a kid because I wanted to make movies. So I am actually a Raider fan, and I would love if the Raiders moved to Las Vegas. But I don't know that the commissioner would allow that to happen. They even made comments that, you know, people had said, well, football, part of the popularity of football is because of the gambling aspect, and it adds to, or at least it adds to the popularity of football. And I believe that it does. I think it would still be pretty popular, but it adds to the popularity of football because there's nothing like betting on a football game. It's not the same as, you know, basketball or baseball or, you know, it's totally a different sport to bet on. So, and of course they denied it and said, no, that has nothing to do with it. It's because of fantasy football. And fantasy football is gambling because most of the pools or fantasy football leagues, you win money. So what the fuck is the difference? But anyway, I know you had some stuff that you wanted to bring up. So let's go to that. And then if we have any time left over, there's still more of the things going on with gold that I had looked at that we can get into as well.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that occurred, you know, I think you and I have talked about Bitcoin, and I've always given my trepidations that, you know, the basic concept is really good. Its capacity to function as money, and money that is peer-to-peer without any intervention.
Right, and to be able to carry. See, to me, the biggest thing and sorry to interrupt, with Bitcoin is the fact that you can travel anywhere and bring your Bitcoin, and you don't have to declare it. You don't have nothing. It's anonymous, and you can be anonymous, even though there's certain things you have to do to be anonymous, and that is kind of might go away at some point. But
well, and the biggest problem though is you can have all that, but if there's no retailers or vendors that are going to accept Bitcoin,
it, right?
Then what's the point? Because money in itself is just a tool.
Well, you can transfer it back though, but I mean,
transfer it back to what?
Well, if you're trying to get it out of the country.
Oh, true.
So if you're trying to, or if you're selling drugs or whatever, but even to just get it out of the country, if you want to leave with a certain amount of money, you're going to have to pay taxes on it and declare it. And then you're going to have to declare it when you bring it into the other country. So if you have Bitcoin, you don't have to say shit. Then when you get to that country, you can exchange it into local currency or U.S. dollars or whatever you want to exchange it to.
True. But the interesting thing is, with the U.S., they tried to vilify Bitcoin by saying it's the dark web and it's money laundering and it's drug cartels. And when that didn't work, then they passed a court case where they said that Bitcoin is a commodity.
It's not a currency.
It's an investment. Right.
They're contradicting themselves.
So you'd have to pay capital gains tax on every single transaction you do, which would make it kind of moot. No retailer is going to want to, set up a point of sale system where they have to pay that type of tax on every single transaction they might accept in Bitcoin.
Yeah, nobody's doing that as far as I know.
There was something interesting that happened in Europe last week. Bitstamp. Bitstamp's a Bitcoin exchange, and they got a license to function and operate in all 28 countries of the European Union. So, yeah, it's going to be officially known as EU Passport Program, which allows financial services providers legally established in one member state to be recognized and operate in all others. That's been one of the biggest problems in the European Union, is that, you know, you may be a little pub in Ireland, but if you're not recognized as, you know, a business and regulated by the European Commission, then, you know, you're limited just to your one sovereign area. So having something that's international, that's accepted all around the entire European Union, this is huge.
Well, what do you mean?
You know,
explain that for a second. When you say you're just limited to your little sovereign area, when you're talking about a pub.
Well, I use the example of just a small mom and pop shop. You know, the thing would be something like Microsoft. You know how Microsoft they sell licensing to their software.
Yeah.
Well, unless you get a passport to function in all of the European Union, you would have to do individual.
You'd have to license in every country.
You'd have to get agreements with every single country to be able to, you know, sell your software and license it. Here, you just
I see what you're saying. If you're talking about it depends on what you're selling. I see what you're saying.
Right. So you're not limited to just one, you know, or having to carry 28 agreements in 28 countries. You can just have one-stop shop. The same way the European Union allows people to migrate back and forth across borders to get jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But the interesting thing, of course, is once you set up a Bitcoin exchange, that's just the first step in leading to then Bitcoin ATMs, Bitcoin processing centers, and it's going to make it easier, especially when banks start getting into the blockchain, to open up point-of-sale systems, POS systems, for retailers to much easier accept Bitcoin as currency for goods and services.
I mean, there are a lot of new businesses that are, I know even in Las Vegas, there are a couple casinos that take it. There's I can't remember the name of it, but it's an Amazon type site. You might know what I'm talking about, that they accept Bitcoin. Of course,
Alibaba?
No, it's, I can't remember the name of it. But it's from what I understand, it's an Amazon type.
I know Zappos does.
Site.
And Zappos is out of Vegas, I believe.
Yeah, they are.
The shoe company.
They're a fucking socialist company. I can't stand them.
Well, the significance though is that Bitcoin has functioned really well for retailers who are e-commerce, but not mainstream brick and mortar.
Right. But I mean, you're exactly right, because I can't think of. It was Overstock.com was the site I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
But you hear about people buying stuff online all the time with Bitcoin, but you're right. You don't hear a lot about actual physical businesses taking Bitcoin. But like I said, there are a couple casinos. There are a few businesses out there, but mostly you'd have to buy. One of the things that somebody was doing was buying gift cards and then using, gift cards. But that's not really, I guess it's kind of doing it in Bitcoin, but, your actual transaction is not in Bitcoin. So, yeah, you're totally right on that there's not a lot of actual physical businesses that accept Bitcoin at this point. But there are, I think there's at least 2 casinos, if not more, which is pretty cool.
Gotcha. So have you heard about the new changes coming to our currency?
Would that be... I know I looked at a lot of articles.
Former slave and...
Yes, the Harriet Tubman... So I don't know exactly how I feel about that. For all I care, they can take off everybody who's on fucking currency. And Andrew Jackson is on the 20 now, right? And that's what they were gonna.
Yeah,
they were gonna put her on the 20.
The irony is of course Andrew Jackson was a staunch advocate against the central bank.
From what I understood, he was also a big racist.
Well, You take the 19th century with a grain of salt because
it was the culture and it's kind of hard
when
to.
The Supreme Court ruled in 1856 or even 1898
Which
that
case?
slavery, Dred Scott, and then of course the 1898 ruling were separate but equal.
But equal, yeah.
Okay. When the Supreme Court makes those rules.
Well, Andrew Jackson was way before that, 1898.
Yeah, he was 1820.
He was the seventh president. Yeah.
Right. The fascinating thing about that, though, I sent this to John B. Wells when I was on a show with him. You know who the first slave owner in America was?
I do not know that.
He was a black man.
Oh, no, I did hear that, actually.
Yeah, there was a black man.
I thought you meant like specific name.
No. He was in, I think, Connecticut or North Carolina, one of the two. Anyway, what he had done is he had brought over from Africa an indentured servant. Now, indentured servitude is where you pay their cost to come over to the country, and they work for 7 years for you.
Yeah, they did that.
They could do whatever.
The whole, in the 1600s, 1700s, the whole 13 colonies, that's pretty much what they did for the majority of, or at least a lot of the labor. They had a lot of indentured servants. And really, people ignore this, but almost not every, but a lot of different, whether you want to call them nationalities or ethnicities, were slaves at some point. The Jews and other. You would know more about this than me.
Sure.
Knowing about history.
The term Aryan. The term Aryan goes way back like 6,000 years to the Indus River Valley, which is now India. And a group of nomads moved into the area, and the local population was very dark. In India today, you've got the lighter Indians and you've got the dark Indians.
Yeah, you do have some
Aryans,
pretty dark Indians.
The Aryans were of a much lighter race. You could almost say that they were Eastern European type or from the steppes of East Europe. And they came down there, and they were stronger than the locals, so they pretty much took over the country.
Well, I think of Nazis when I think of Aryans, like the Aryan, that's what they call themselves. Like the Aryan Brotherhood was some prison gang in a movie.
You're right. That's where they got it from, but I'll show you the reason why. Okay, they were lighter skins, and the locals in India at the time were much darker skin. And when they set up the society, they did it by what is the caste system. And the caste system had like 6 different levels of the caste, and the lighter skins were always in charge. The darker skins were more of the workers and the pretty much non-existent, et cetera.
And they just accepted that as in the next life that they're going to be higher up, that that's their part in life at that point. And then when they die, they're going to kind of go through the cycle of, okay, well, in my next life, I'll be higher up if I do good in this life and just follow my path or whatever.
Exactly. And so that started the concept that lighter skinned people were more pure of race. And see, that's where the Nazis, when they were studying their Thule occult religion.
That's where they got Aryan from? That's
where they got the Aryan from. Yeah, exactly. So they stole that from something that happened 6,000 years when they were studying their occult religion.
Which is so fucking stupid, because even the light-skinned Indians are still like tan. I mean, it's not like they're white.
You want to talk? I found probably the greatest melting pot in the world, and that's Panama. Because when the Panama Canal was being built, workers from all over the world came, from China, from India, from Latin America, from Africa, from the United States. And when the Panama Canal was set and they created the Isthmus region, all those workers stayed. They intermarried. So if you walk down Panama City today, you will see 1,000 different shades of people all up and down the black and white spectrum.
Well, I mean, from what people are saying, of course, you have people that do radio shows that call themselves libertarians that want to maintain the white race, and I guess think people should be concerned about making sure, I guess, that white people marry white people so they continue the white race, which to me is just ridiculous, and who really gives a fuck. But I can't, it's actually fucking Chris Cantwell who has said stuff like that, which is just, to me, totally out there, and he claims he's not a racist though. But anyway,
yeah, getting back to the currency, Harriet Tubman, you know what, for me, I'll tell you why this might be significant here in a second, but I started thinking about it. You know, Andrew Jackson is rolling over in the grave for all these 100 years that they would dare put him on a Federal Reserve note, a fiat currency.
right.
So Harriet Tubman, who is she? She's a former slave who became an abolitionist. Now, what
Underground Railroad.
Let me take a look at, when you take a look at the Federal Reserve note, hang on a second.
But why her and not, why not Martin Luther King, or why not?
Well, it should be, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, or
why not? Well, and the other
Grover.
thing is, it sounds like, and for, like I said, for all I care, you can take all the fucking faces off of money and just make it however, like blank, fucking draw pictures on it. I don't give a fuck. But in the current climate, it sounds like, oh, we need to be, more diverse. So we have to, there's no women on money neither.
Well, there is.
Oh, there is.
There's,
Susan B. Anthony.
No.
Money.
There's a woman on the most important piece of money that we have. The gold ounce coin.
Well, that doesn't, I'm talking about
Lady Liberty.
That doesn't really count. That's not a real person, and that's not a coin. That's really it's not a circulated coin.
Well, here's the significance about.
But they did have they did have the Susan B. Anthony 50-cent piece, which they don't make it anymore.
Well, sure, and we used to have Lady Liberty on the old quarters.
Yeah, but that's still not a real person.
Well, they're supposed to be. The money is supposed to symbolize America, and the founding fathers used to be the most important. Now nobody can. Most of the high school graduates
people can't name them.
Yeah, but here's what I found significant. Let's take a look at Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Now, Federal Reserve note.
Well, now you're talking Bible stuff, and
don't do it about the Bible. What does it say? The borrower is slave to the lender.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm talking.
Which is true.
Now, what is the Federal Reserve note? The Federal Reserve note is a debt instrument. Okay, the government creates a treasury bond, sells it to the Fed. The Fed prints money, and we owe interest on that money.
So really,
it's a debt instrument,
right?
And because of that, the federal government is slave to the lender, to the
so really
Federal
it should
Reserve.
Be all former slaves on money is what it really should be.
Isn't our money a slave instrument? Because it's a debt instrument.
Well, it is, because money is created by debt, and if you're in debt, essentially, it depends how much debt you're in, but still, you're in some kind of you owe somebody something, and you are a slave to debt. That's the whole reason why, government wants everybody to be in debt, because they're more controllable. They get to hold something over them. True.
But the problem is that debt itself is not necessarily bad. It's just people don't know how to use debt.
Yeah, I know. There's like with corporations that you leveraging your debt, and the ratio of capital to debt or whatever.
I'll tell you something. In life, in society, there are extremely very, very few people who went to college, got a job, earned money from working for the man, and then took that money and built a $1 billion business. Very few did that. Warren Buffett, they like to make fun of Donald Trump. They say, oh, his dad lent him $2 million when he got out of college to do real estate in New York.
$1 million, but he got like $200 million later when he died. Supposedly.
Yeah, but by then he was.
But that was right. That was after he built his businesses and whatever.
Warren Buffett didn't start with his own money. 30 investors to give him money set up Berkshire Hathaway and then built his empire on other people's money.
A lot of people get loans to start businesses. I think the majority of people.
Exactly. This is what capitalism is all about. Okay, for a bank, if a bank worked properly, okay, they would, when you deposit money on there, they would give you a certain percentage. They would loan that capital then out to businesses or people or whatever for a higher interest. And they would skim the difference between what they paid you to hold your money on account and what they did getting back money for the loan. Okay, that's a common way, and it's a really decent way.
Well, it kind of worked that way, except for the
until
go ahead.
Glass-Steagall was removed by Clinton in '96, which allowed banks then to take the commercial side and the investment side and become one. And so then the banks started speculating. Instead of loaning out for businesses or for homes or for cars or for education, they started speculating.
Well, it's not just that; it's also even
in derivatives. In insurance,
but even before that, you had fractional reserve banking.
Well, yeah,
which is fucked up in itself. I mean, you can't.
But investment banking is much different because the speculation and the risk is much
higher,
further.
right? So you're risking money that you shouldn't be risking. But either way. Even with just fractional reserve banking alone, I mean, that's pretty bad. And you can't, even if you loaned out what you took in, you still couldn't pay it all back. But you're not only doing that, you're taking the money and for every $100, you're lending out like 1,000. And that's insane. And you're creating more money. Creating more debt.
The thing about it is debt itself is not bad because debt is based on capital, and capital is usually borrowed from others to be able to facilitate building something.
But they're not really borrowing it from others because they're creating money in the process through fractional reserve banking.
This is fractional reserve banking is a more modern thing. We're talking over the last 80 years. Before then, capitalism went back to Adam Smith in the 1700s. Okay, so for the most part, capitalism is supposed to work that way. We've turned into crony capitalism, and that's another thing, and that's a prostitution.
Well, I don't use the word capitalism. I say that I believe in free markets, and maybe it's a little different than the definition of capitalism because things like corporations are government-created entities. They don't exist without government. So I say
corporations
free markets
have been around for forever.
But they're still a government. They're a government-created entity because it's all about the liability.
Well, true, but the big corporation that most people who studied history remember is the East India Trading Company.
Yeah,
and
I remember that from the mafia movies. Actually, I think.
What they did was they got a charter from the monarchy, the charter from the king, to function in this capacity, and they got the protections and the things from that. But that aside, the thing about the Warren Buffett's and that is debt is not a bad thing. But what is the difference between what the rich do and what the poor do when it comes to debt? The poor buy crap. They buy stuff. Okay.
The rich invest it.
The rich buy assets, something that's going to make them money. That's why debt in itself is not bad, but it's the difference of the mindset of what we do with the debt. If we get a credit card and we go take a vacation, at the end of the day,
to me, that's a
you've
waste,
got some memories, but you owe a debt and you've got nothing to show for it. It's not making you money. But same thing with a house. When you buy a house, get a mortgage for a house,
you have an asset.
You don't make any money until you sell the house. But you're paying into that house every single month. Whether something breaks down, you're paying on the mortgage, you're paying the insurance, You're paying water, electricity, et cetera. So
well, you have to, but those are things you can't avoid, whether you buy a house or rent a. I mean, you got to have a house. I mean,
right,
or an apartment at least. You have to have a place to live. You have to pay. You have to have electricity. But yeah, I mean, buying a house up until 2008, from what I understood, that it would always appreciate. Until then.
Yeah, and the only reason it appreciated is because we devalued the money. Back in the 1960s, housing prices would go up maybe 0.1% per year. You could buy, for $12,000, you could buy a brand new house. That same house today would go for $180,000 to $200,000, depending on where you're at.
And that's just based on inflation.
Exactly, because the house didn't change. It's like
right.
There's a misnomer when it comes to gold. We talk about the gold prices going up. No. If I took an ounce of gold in 1920 and buried it, and I came back tomorrow and dug it up, how much would I have left? I'd have an ounce of gold. Gold didn't change. Only its relation to dollars value
right.
changed.
People don't
and
understand
it's the dollar that devalued, which made that asset worth more in dollar terms.
Well, I think people look at it totally differently when they look at things going up in value. They don't look at the fact that it's the devaluation of the dollar and inflation. They look at it like, hey, this is worth more now. I'm sure there are things that can become worth more because of scarcity. If there's something that there's a whole bunch of one thing that was created or something, and then half of them, whatever, they were destroyed, it could appreciate that way because now you have a smaller supply. But other than that, I don't think people look at items that way. They look at it like, hey, it's an investment, I'm going to make money on it. And most of the time, a lot of those things, you're not technically making money off it. It's like guns. If we were in a situation where there was a real need for guns and there was not a big supply, then you could sell guns for more money. And it's not because of inflation or the devaluation of the dollar. It's because supply and demand. But usually that's not the case.
No, and see, that's why the stock markets, and it's interesting, there was a Gallup poll that came out earlier this month, about 2 weeks ago, that ever since 2008, 56% of all adults in America have either left the stock market or they've never bought a stock.
Yeah, I've never bought a stock because I'd rather take my money and gamble it.
And that's even including getting a 401k or a mutual fund.
I have a 401k. Like, but the only reason I have a 401k, I have it for one reason only, and I wish I could fucking take the money out once a year, is because I have matching. So that's the only reason I have a 401k. I only have what they
if it's a 401k
match.
Versus a 457, there's a good chance you can roll that over into a gold IRA. And the great thing about that is the gold IRA is you can actually request to have the physical gold or silver delivered to you.
See, now, if you can do that, I would do it. If it was just gold on paper, I wouldn't, because we all know about gold on paper and most of it not really existing.
Yeah, I'll check that out and I'll send you an email or
yeah, let me know, because I would definitely do that if I could get the physical gold. But the only reason I do 401k right now is because technically I'm getting free money. And, of course, I can't take it out, but I can borrow it, and then I have to pay it back, but I'm paying myself back, and the interest is really low. So I borrowed from it, which was cool.
And you can do the same thing with gold and silver. What you have to do is, there's some technical things. It's like you have to keep it – you can keep it in your house or whatever, but you have to keep it separate from your other money. like in say you had two lock boxes, one would have to be strictly for your IRA because they can demand to see the assets at any time. Otherwise people would just be using that to buy gold and silver, and then they just spend it or they do whatever with it, and then it would be meaningless because that'd be fraud.
Right. They could buy gold and silver and then sell the gold and silver and then take the money and just use it and never
Correct.
pay the taxes.
The taxes or anything. Yeah, that's why you have to always, if you demand the physical gold and silver, you have to keep it segregated from any other money or assets you have, and then you have to be prepared that maybe once a year the manager over that gold and silver IRA for you is going to demand that you bring it in and they can physically see that you still have it.
Well,
okay.
That wouldn't
so
be
there are things with that, but it's to protect. And then, of course, the interesting thing is it's treated like any other 401k or IRA. At age, 70, you have to start spending 10% of it or something.
Yeah, but at that point,
it's kind of funny. It's weird, but
who knows what's going to happen between now and then? So
and if the whole
concerned.
financial system collapses, then who cares? They're not going to be chasing.
That's what I mean.
Your thing, your wealth is in your hands, and you won't have to probably pay taxes on it. You won't have to do anything on it. And it's going to be valued at whatever the Chinese decide to do back to currency.
A lot of places you can take it out and just pay the tax penalty. And what I was going to plan on doing is because they match it, I was going to pay the tax penalty and I would still make money from their match, even with the higher tax penalty. So that's what I was going to do, but I can't take it out. I can only borrow from it. So. And right. I borrow from it at interest, but it still all goes back to me anyway. The interest even goes back into my 401k account. But we only got, we're about 35 minutes over, which, I wanted to go a little over anyway. But anything else that you want to bring up before we go?
We got some interesting things going on with the dollar, the war. If anybody does monitor the dollar index, look for the 93.5 number on there. That has gotten to be a line in the sand. That if it goes through there, then you could see the dollar just absolutely collapse. You could see gold start to really skyrocket. There's a lot of things. Gold prices, the war that the paper markets are trying to protect is $1,280 to $1,300. They're doing everything, including last week when gold got up to $1,276. In a 5-minute period, somebody dumped $2 billion or 38 million ounces of gold right there in the market. They didn't have it. It was just a paper contract they printed out in thin air. Dropped $25 off the gold price. But that's
and
one thing
silver
is 20%
went way up too. But sorry to
it was up 83 cents.
Well, I mean, it's been up since it was $14 at one point. Now it's like 17 something. So I'm upset that I had got rid of all my gold and silver, and now I want to build it back up. So hopefully I'm able to save up some money and do that before gold goes too high, because I really think it's important that everybody has gold. And I had about $10,000 worth of gold and silver, and I would have had more now because it would have went up. I bought it at lower prices than what it is now. So
by the way, I believe I'm looking out there, and there may be through a third party a way you can roll your 401k or IRA into Carrot Bars.
Oh, okay. Well,
so Carrot Bars may function in the capacity of allowing you to get your gold from there and keep it offshore, or have it delivered to you. Either one.
All right. Well, let me know what information you find out on that, and then I can also talk about that on the air as well for other people. I did hear that you can roll something about gold IRAs or whatever. I've heard somebody mention that before, but I didn't. I thought that was if you went out and actually purchased your own gold IRA, not that you could take your 401k and do it that way. So if you can do that, then that would be great, because I'd rather take all the money that I have there and have gold and silver, or just gold, whichever.
Yeah, I'll send you the information, and you can take a look at it if there's something you want to do, and otherwise, then you can post that same thing onto to others or on your website if they're interested.
All right, great. Well, thanks as always for joining us. Again, you could check Ken out at thedailyeconomist.com. You can get his RSS feeds so you will be kept up to date with all this information, because it is constantly changing, and a lot of things are going on that are going to affect people directly a lot more than what they tell you on your fucking, CNN or any of these other stupid news channels. So thanks, everybody. We will be back tomorrow, and Katie Reyes will be co-hosting, so be sure to tune in for that. And that's all for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it, and have a good night.
Arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to all our Facebook pages. We actually have 4, and other social media info, as well as contact information and more, pictures, archives, all sorts of things at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. I just realized I haven't heard from Ken Schortgen yet, who joins us every other Wednesday, and I did check with him, and I never prepare anything in the event that something happens and Ken doesn't show up, because he's been so reliable. I mean, if he told me beforehand, I obviously would. But I mean, I never, if he says he's going to be there, I have, I don't know about never, but at least in a long, long time, prepared something in the event that he doesn't show up, because he's so reliable that he always shows up. So hopefully there's not some emergency. And if he didn't show up, I would think that there's some emergency going on. But anyway, I have a let me text. I actually did get a phone call. Hopefully that was not Ken calling saying I cannot make it. But I did want to talk for a minute about about yesterday's show. And, there's a couple things I want to mention. One, I was listening back, which is something that even Mark Edge of Free Talk Live, and I was doing this before he even brought it up, but had suggested, always listen back to your shows, maybe when you've been doing it 5 or 10 years, but I mean, you can always get better. So always listen back and look at the things that you can improve, look at the issues that you have. And I'm aware of a lot of issues that I have, whether it comes to or saying something slow or pausing, things along those lines, or using certain words that I'll use them in one sentence and then maybe the next sentence I won't, but I'll use it again in the sentence after that. So, I mean, I strive to be as good as possible, and I'm still not even close to where I want to be at. And it makes it harder with the whole work schedule and everything, and doing this show 3 nights a week. But again, as I've always said, I choose to do it. I don't have to do a show. I can just go to work and then after work rest if I want to, or do nothing. But I'm trying to accomplish something here as well. So I was listening to last night's show, and I thought the content and what I put together, although I could have, there's a couple spots where I could have done a better job and at least got a sentence or two in about some things. But only doing a 2-hour show now, I only have so much time. So that was one of the reasons why. But I still felt like, hey, I could have done better where I missed a couple things. And I had gotten an email before. I'm so conscious of this now because I got an email before, which I think was unfair, especially based on what my focus was. Although they did have some legitimate.
Do it! Just do it! Just do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Just do it!
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the enforcement. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is April 27th, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. Also 7 o'clock Arizona time for now, as Arizona does not change their clocks. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as Stitcher, at least by the next day. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And I wish they would start wearing their own gang signs or actually, you know what it is? It's that fucking lapel pin. They have that like flag. Anybody wearing that little lapel, I think that's what it's called, that flag pin, they're a member. That's a fucking gang sign, just like, you know, the Bloods and the Crips. They wear it really small, though, so it's hard to tell from far away. You need, like, binoculars. Anyway, we're happy to hear from you, and you can reach us via phone, even though we haven't got a phone call, and I don't remember the last time we got a phone call, but yet I still have a phone that you can call in and give your comments at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Ever since I left Blog Talk Radio, I used to get like a fair amount of calls. I don't know if just people don't pay attention to changes or they just still have the same old number or just people stop listening or who knows. Well, I mean, I know I have people listening, so I think more of the people listen now to the archives than the live show. So I definitely need to work on getting more people to listen live as opposed to the archives so we can get some interaction with the listeners. And you can also Skype into the show. I don't know that a lot of shows do that. At Nonpartisan Liberty for All is the username, and just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about. And check us out. I was saying that
can you hear me?
Yeah. You can hear me, right? No, I guess can't. That's you on your side that you can't. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you, but I'm listening to the stream, so we'll work it that way.
I guess you're having a lot of issues today
I can
with
only hear you from. Hang on a second. Let me
connecting.
see if
I know it's on your side.
Go ahead and talk.
Yeah. Can you hear me there?
No, I can only. I can't hear you through Skype. I'm listening to the stream.
Well, let me look at my Skype. There shouldn't be any issues here. Let's look at the audio settings.
Hey, Dave. I'm gonna go ahead and reboot out of Skype. I'm gonna reset my headset and I'll pop back on.
All right. Yeah, today's not your day, man. As I was saying, that Ken was on another show where it wasn't on his side, it was on their side because they had said so, and they were having some issues.
No, the other one I know is Angel's fault, though.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was saying, that I know it was their fault. Because I had actually just listened right before I came on the air. So that I know was their fault. But this, I'm pretty sure that it's on your side, although you never know. I could have done something. So anyway, while we're waiting for Ken to try to straighten that out, let me go to my Skype and see. I mean, I haven't changed anything on my settings, and yeah, I mean, although I do not see the microphone coming up, so I think it might be me, actually. And it might be, I don't think I've had anybody on Skype since it converted over from, what did it convert over from? Windows 10 just automatically upgraded, unfortunately. Let's see, it's making fucking stupid noise. Windows 10 actually was converted. So let me open this and make sure. No, Skype is, it should be working. So let me try to connect Ken now, although I don't see.
Okay, how are we doing this time?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
No luck?
I think I know what it is. I gotta, because
this is weird.
No, I think I know what it is. Let me, see, that's there.
This is very weird.
Hello? No, I think I know what it is, because what happened was, there we go. That might do it. Okay, what about now? No, still can't hear me. All right, let me try one more thing.
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm not connected to you for some reason.
Okay, it doesn't show Skype is muted. What about now?
Let me shut off the.
Use what they're using to ban it, or what they used in the first place, that had nothing to do with the fact that the dangers of addiction anyway. It was for racist reasons, and then it had to do with the war. And I know everybody will say that I'm crazy because it's so bad and all of this shit. It's because you've been fucking brainwashed to believe that. That's what it is. Because if it wasn't illegal, there would be no fucking problem with it. Because so what? If somebody's addicted to it, it doesn't matter. Now, there is, I guess, the issue of, well, somebody could overdose. And, of course, if it was legal, there'd be so much more information. You could go to doctors. You could go to pharmacists. You could go, well, maybe there wouldn't be. Well, I guess there would still be pharmacists, but you just go and buy it. It wouldn't be showing prescription. But that's more with the really powerful shit. And a lot of those people are people that are trying to fucking die from it, and that's why they're dying, not because they actually overdose. Heroin's a different story, and heroin is also a drug mixed on the fucking street, and who knows what's in it. So to me, a lot of it is just hype And of course, I believe all drugs should be legal, not based on that principle, but based on the principle that you can put whatever you want in your own body. But at the same time, I don't even think it's that bad. It comes from a plant, and really the only downside to it is the addiction. But if it wasn't illegal, who gives a fuck if you're addicted? Because you can buy it for a reasonable price. You'd be able to go to the supermarket or a pharmacy or whatever, and it'd be the same as alcohol. So it's a bunch of bullshit. It's just like in thinking about my show, saying the word fuck and a 3-year-old hearing fuck. What does that do? Why do people give a shit if a 3-year-old hears the word fuck? You know why? Because they're conditioned to think that, oh, you can't hear that or you can't say that. It's a fucking word. So anyway, Ken is on the line. So I'm going to bring him on. A lot going on with gold and the currency, so I'm sure he'll have a lot to talk about. I had looked at his website, The Daily Economist, which you can find at thedailyeconomist.com, and almost everything the majority of articles have to do with gold. So there is a lot of things going on with gold. And I'm sure he has some other stuff to talk about as well, as the last time he was on was a couple weeks ago, as he joins us every other Wednesday, Ken Schortgen. Ken, thanks for joining. Well, let me turn off the music here. I know you had some other technical issues today on another show, so let me make sure you don't have any more. You there? Oh. Now he's having technical issues on my show too. But actually on the other show it was them, because Ken, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Dave?
There we go, yeah. Points. Some of it was also just very insulting. So there's a difference between constructive criticism and trying to insult somebody. It was a combination, to be honest. There was some constructive criticism, there was some insults. So they did have some points, and I always think about that now. But I'm not an expert on everything, and I can't be. And there's only so much research I have time to do. And really the show is more about my opinions on what's going on, informing people the gist of what's going on, not say when it comes to the history part of it, yes, informing people of the history, but not going into in depth with it. So anyway, I thought I did a pretty good job content-wise, but I felt like I listened back and I just felt monotone and not, I wouldn't say emotional enough, but upbeat enough and not up enough for the radio. And while I was doing it, I felt like I was, because I'm very conscious of that. But then when I listened back, I'm like, well, not like I was totally monotone, like today's show, we are going to, I mean, it wasn't like that, but it just wasn't enough energy, I guess would be the best word to put into it. And I didn't feel like there was a best, I put the greatest amount of energy into the show yesterday. So I apologize for that, because I thought the content was pretty good, and I thought there was a lot of things that I wasn't even aware of. Some of them I was, but that was very important. And the other thing is that I looked up again all of the symptoms of or long-term damage of opiates, what opiates can do to your body long-term, and side effects. The side effects are, things like constipation and just basic things that you'd get from any other drug. And long term, there's nothing that I saw that really is anything that you can't live with. It's not like it will destroy your liver or your heart or your kidneys or anything like that. So again, I asked the question, especially with opiates, I know they're very addictive, but at the same time, that's really the only thing. And if you look at cigarettes, fucking cigarettes are just as addictive as opiates. And even alcohol, it takes a lot longer to get addicted to alcohol. But once you get addicted to alcohol, from what I understand, I've never been addicted to alcohol, so I don't know. But from what I understand, it's pretty bad. And withdrawal from cigarettes is pretty bad, too. I've never smoked, so I don't know anything about that. But my point being is that if they weren't illegal, you eliminate the problem with being able to get them, just like cigarettes. If somebody can't get their cigarettes, they might do something to get them. And to